Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Lived in the Loud House movie. Before we start, please go support KING-JEISON for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made, there will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Naruto is a male. Chapter 1. Walking in what seemed like a normal routine in his life, a man walked towards the small shelf raised on a stick better known as the mailbox that every home had in the town of Royal Woods. This action of getting off the mail truck and leaving letters and the occasional package had already been done around 79 times, even though it was barely 5:49 in the morning. Honestly, this was quite an exhausting job, if the brown-haired man had anything to say. However, the man wouldn't complain. After all, he worked because he needed to, so opening the small grid of the mailbox, the man proceeded to put some letters in it and then closed the mailbox, and as if it were an automatic reflex, his hand raised the small red lever on the side of the mailbox to indicate to the inhabitants of the house that they had mail. Turning around, the man proceeded to walk calmly to the truck that had the name of the company it belonged to printed on its side in large letters. Said company was known as FedEx, a company quite well known in the United States for its large coverage of shipments to other countries. But leaving that topic for another time, the man simply got into the truck and for the 80th time, turned it on to start driving in the direction of the other residential area that really wasn't that far away. Note: the word octogenta is LXXX in Roman numerals, which in turn means it is 80. And when he said it wasn't that far, he meant it literally, since the truck didn't even last 2 minutes when he was already parking the truck in front of a 2-story white house that didn't seem different from the others. Well, that would be the case if they didn't count the large number of toys thrown in the yard, almost as if they were mines prepared to make noise or make him slip with any false move. However, unfortunately for the delivery man, this house had a package that wasn't small enough to leave in the mailbox. In fact, the size of the package he had to leave was comparable to that of a microwave, and well, it could also have weighed as much as a microwave. Ignoring for the moment the dimensions of the package he had to leave, the delivery man simply approached the mailbox to leave the letters. Then, almost with practiced agility, the man moved nimbly around the toys in the yard next to the package until he reached the doors of the house. The man hadn't really practiced dodging toys, he had actually developed that skill after having to leave countless packages in many homes of families who seemed to have quite a few children. However, this was certainly one of the few that challenged his ability to deliver a package, but putting it out of his mind, the man simply left the package in front of the door of the house and then rang the bell. Once the bell was rang, the man turned around without really expecting someone to answer him. So going down the 2 steps, the man simply walked past a small sign that said, "Loud Family Residence." Once past a garden with mines, the man got back into the truck to continue with his day-to-day life, and without further ado, he left the residence, which was left in a quite comforting silence that was provided by the silent morning. However, inside the loud house things were already getting lively, or well, someone had already decided to get up, so heading to the 2nd floor, one of the 5 doors that were rooms began to open with an almost veiled tranquility. The doors themselves were divided into ones in front of the other, except for the door that had just opened. Said door was located at the end of the hallway on the right-hand side. From the apparently dark room, only a few rays of light of some not so bright colors escaped, which perhaps served to color some apexes of the floor. With a rather silent tranquility, a clump of blonde hair calmly peeked out from inside, almost as if it was making sure that there was no one else in the small, totally silent hallway. Leaving the room completely, a teenager of about 18 years old walked calmly while wearing a kind of grayish pajamas. The teenager himself had a fairly tall body of about 1.78, and as for his constitution, well, from what was seen when the teenager put his hand under his sweater to scratch his chest, you could say that the teenager was in quite good physical condition, judging by the perfectly marked abdomen next to that V that many men found difficult to have. His eyes are an electric blue that almost seemed to shine with any speck of light that was reflected in them. On his cheeks seemed to be highlighted 3 whisker marks on each cheek that made him look like some kind of feline or predator. Letting out a yawn, the blonde teenager showed some quite white teeth, along with fangs slightly longer than normal, which in itself did not help him in his feline appearance. This blonde boy with a sleepy expression was called Naruto Loud. The older brother of 10 sisters, or well, to be more specific, Naruto is the older brother of 10 stepsisters who at this moment were peacefully asleep in their rooms. The reason why Naruto was adopted into a fairly large family was quite funny and hilarious if you took the time to think about it, since the reason for his adoption was given by the simple fact that the host of the house, who was Naruto's stepfather, wanted a man to follow the Loud surname, and well, after 2 attempts in which they had their 2 girls, they decided to adopt him at age 3 to get rid of the worry, although they still did not give up and made 8 more attempts, and well, you see, Naruto would possibly have had more sisters if it were not for the sudden death of the host of the house, Mr. Lin Loud, a year ago. This in itself was a hard blow for the Loud family. Mr. Loud's departure not only affected them emotionally, but also greatly affected them financially, since the now hostess of the house Rita Loud, Naruto's stepmother, was forced to stay working many hours of overtime as a dental assistant, and even so, food was something that was still scarce in the Loud family. No matter how many overtime hours Rita worked, it was still not enough. That is why after seeing his family suffer for 2 months, Naruto was forced to put on his adult pants at 17 years old and look for a job which he found as an instructor in a gym, and well, the truth is Naruto did not know much about how to instruct a person to exercise, but the owner of the gym seemed to insist fervently that he work for her, despite the fact that he had told her that he did not know how to instruct. It is worth noting that a few weeks later the gym became one of the busiest in the region by women, which led to Naruto being given a raise for his good work. Surely Naruto was the employee who had been provided with a raise the fastest in the world. But well, leaving that matter aside, Naruto's work helped restore the economy in the Loud family, bringing a smile to the blonde's face as he could see the happiness in his sisters and mother again. It had been 1 year and 3 months since he had gotten a job at that gym, and his salary was approximately $2,000 per month, and well, from what his boss said, it could be that at any moment he could be receiving another raise if he did some extra jobs. Naruto actually knew what jobs his boss was really referring to, but as long as he could keep his family afloat, he was going to do it. So there was Naruto coming out of the bathroom after showering in white pants, while some drops of water dripped from his golden hair shaved on the sides, and some slid down his well-shaped body, while he absent-mindedly put on a black sweater. Naruto haircut. Going down the stairs with a slight hint of boredom, our blonde protagonist headed with veiled calm towards the kitchen, only to notice the approximately 15 bags of groceries that were on the kitchen counter, groceries that he had been in charge of buying the day before, while coming from a hard and tiring day of work, instructing the many amounts of teenagers and single mothers that came to the gym in search of his service. Leaving work to one side for a moment, Naruto simply rummaged through one of the bags until he finally pulled out a carton of eggs and a packet of pancake flour. With almost expert skill, Naruto emptied the flour into a somewhat large tray and then, with insane speed, broke some eggs and poured them onto the flour. Without wasting any time, Naruto turned around in the direction of the fridge and calmly pulled out a carton of milk along with one of the many packets of bacon in the freezer. So returning with the tray, Naruto poured the white liquid over the flour, opening a drawer to the side of it. Naruto took out the manual kitchen whisk so that quickly and precisely, he began to beat with such speed that his hands seemed almost a blur. Finally, after about 3 minutes of beating, leaving a fairly liquid and somewhat condensed mass, Naruto proceeded to look for a pan to then place it on the stove and try to turn it on, only to realize that the stove's ignition system had broken once again. Letting out a slight sigh, Naruto simply took a box of matches to light the stove. Returning once more to the refrigerator, Naruto now took out a fairly large jar of butter and with the help of the spatula, Naruto proceeded to spread the butter in the pan, which began to melt the butter until it became a small puddle. So, taking the pan by the handle, Naruto proceeded to completely grease the pan so that he could finally pour the pancake in small circles so that they would cook. Staying for a moment watching the pancakes cook, Naruto allowed himself to enter that typical trance-like moment when you wake up while staring at a shoe like an owl. His body remained completely motionless as he listened to the slight sizzle of the butter cooking the pancake that was already beginning to turn a golden color around it. However, his trance-like state quickly vanished when a loud roar was heard on the second floor with voices that seemed to demand something. Naruto actually smiled when one of the typical events of the Loud residence was present like every morning, and that was who bathed first. "Yesterday I took a bath last. So I have to go first today," was the voice Naruto heard as he placed another pan on the stove in which he would cook the bacon. So placing the first strips of bacon, Naruto could hear someone proceeding to enter the bathroom. However, that was not enough for the others who remained to be satisfied. Therefore once again the house became livelier with each morning since he could remember. A few minutes passed and the screams of his sisters complaining about who would use the bathroom next had completely faded, indicating that they all had to have used the bathroom, and Naruto was now taking the last strips of bacon out of the pan with a rather worn appearance so that he calmly placed them on a plate with some pancakes. To finish, the blonde simply took the last 2 plates and then walked in the direction of the fairly large table, and even so, and yet a space on the table was empty, remembering the death of the former host. However, Naruto took those thoughts out of his head and instead turned his gaze in the direction of a wall clock that hung lazily to such an extent that it seemed that it would fall at any moment. Said clock marked 7 o'clock, and as if it were an indication 2 arms peeked out from behind the blonde, who could only feel how they surrounded his neck in a soft hug, so smiling at the hug Naruto proceeded to greet. "Good morning, Lori, how are you waking up?" Our favorite blonde greeted the now recognized as Lori, who simply rested her left cheek against Naruto's right cheek, revealing a blonde with short shoulder-length hair, wearing a simple light blue t-shirt, along with brown shorts. Lori was the first older sister among all of them at 17, and as for her attitude, you could say that she was one of those people who could be glued to their cell phones for a long time, without even looking bored at all. However, when Naruto was around, she seemed to try to spend as little time on the cell phone as possible, and instead tried to spend as much time as possible with her blonde brother. "Good morning, Naruto, I'm fine now that I'm with you," Lori greeted as well. She heard a pair of footsteps behind her, so she stopped hugging Naruto and simply stepped aside, dodging a second blonde who lunged at the blonde, who could only feel him being given a bear hug. "Good morning, Naruto. How's my favorite brother waking up?" Greeted a girl with equally long blonde hair down to her back, while wearing round sunglasses on her head and wearing a green dress with some ruffles. This girl with a bubbly attitude was the second older sister after Lori at 16 years old. "Good morning, Lini, quite well, I must say that your attitude always fills me with courage," Naruto greeted to reciprocate the hug of the blonde who simply smiled more, while an almost imperceptible blush colored her cheeks. "Ow, I thought I was your favorite sister," Lori complained mockingly, causing Lini to turn to look at her without losing her smile. "Naruto is my favorite brother and of my sisters all are my favorites," clarified Lini, to which Naruto and Lori could only sweat at what the blonde said, and well, the truth is it was not a surprise that that was the answer, since in terms of mentality, Lini was somewhat clumsy when it came to socialization, in other things like studies and learning she was a little above average. But well, that was not something that really bothered him, and instead Naruto could affirm that it was something he liked about her, since it gave her a certain air of tenderness. "Why, it's up, brother. How do you wake up?" Was the entrance of a girl with fairly short brown hair, while wearing a purple sweater with a skull next to a plaid skirt of a slightly lighter purple. This was the sister who followed after Lini at 15 years old. She was a girl with an attitude not as bubbly as Lini, but she could still be considered lively, and as for her tastes, well, she is a quite devoted fan of rock music, so much so that Naruto once gave her one of the 2 guitars he had when he won them in a raffle, in which he participated after buying some sweaters from Luna's favorite rock band. It should be noted that after Luna's insistence Naruto finally learned to play the guitar with her, and since then they sometimes played one music or another. "What's up?" "I was waiting for the rock lover," Naruto replied as he extended his fist to the brown-haired girl who proceeded to bump it with her fist quite enthusiastically. However, the balance did not end there, since with a quite exact precision, the two began to make a seemingly secret greeting between the two that only the two could do until when it finally finished, the brown-haired girl ended up giving him a hug on the blonde's torso, who reciprocated with a smile. "I can't believe you still remember that complicated greeting," complained a mocking Lori, who had an eyebrow raised as she headed to her self-designated seat at the table. Luna was about to respond to her older sister with a boastful answer, however another voice interrupted her, causing those present to turn to see the sister who followed after Luna at 14 years old. The girl with brown hair but a lighter shade than Luna's that reached her back while wearing a white shirt with short sleeves and a pink flower that adorned the left side of the shirt. Along with it, she had a yellow plaid skirt up to her knees, along with stockings that matched the skirt. "What does one gardener say to another?" the girl asked, leaving everyone in almost awkward silence until Naruto finally asked with a smile, waiting to see what the joke was. "What do you say?" Naruto asked, to which the girl's smile increased greatly, so with a seriously mocking voice she answered. "See you when we can," replied the brunette, causing those present except Naruto to remain in an even more uncomfortable silence at the bad joke. However, Naruto simply laughed heartily at the joke, since the joke itself was so bad that it was funny if you saw it in a more objective way. However, as his older brother he had to teach him better jokes so that he only have bad jokes in his arsenal, and that was understood by the brunette, who quickly took out a small notebook along with a pencil, since in itself every morning, Naruto taught her a new joke. "That was good, Lewin, but what about this one? What's the worst thing about a bald man?" Naruto asked with a smile, to which the now identified as Lewin proceeded to write the question down on her notepad and then turn her gaze back to Naruto. "Which one?" the brunette asked with a longing look on her face that the others in the room strangely had as well, waiting for the answer. "Having crazy ideas," Naruto replied, leaving the kitchen again in a silence that was quickly overshadowed by the brunette's almost thunderous laughter, along with the slightly more controlled giggles of the others, who had to admit that the joke was funny. "That was a good one," Naruto congratulated Lewin as she wrote down the rest of the joke in her notebook. Naruto simply watched her with a smile as she wrote down her joke in her repertoire, knowing that when she got to school, she would surely tell it to her friends. However, her thoughts vanished when she noticed a blur approaching her face with a fairly good speed, despite its fairly fast size it was going. So moving his hand as fast as he could, Naruto proceeded to catch the object, which stopped dead, leaving behind a resounding slap sound in the kitchen, causing everyone to turn to look in his direction, only to see how he was holding an American football, while the tendons and veins in his arm were marked, implying the great strength he exerted in his grip. "As skilled as ever, I can never catch you off guard," said a younger voice, drawing the attention of the blonde, who could only see another of his sisters with equally brown hair tied in a ponytail and freckles on her cheeks, while wearing her always faithful white sports uniform with red sleeves, and a "1" was printed on her shirt. This indicated that she was on a soccer team, and well, as you may have noticed, this girl was a fan of the sport and was the sister who followed after Lewin at 13 years old. "Well, I owe that to a certain star athlete named Lin, by the way. Where is that radiant star? I don't see her anywhere," was what Naruto said, causing the brunette, now recognized as Lin, to start jumping in front of the blonde while waving her arms with the intention of getting the blonde's attention. Here's your star," Lin called, causing Naruto to look down with an amused smile, then pretend to be dazzled. "Ay. My eyes burned seeing so much brightness," said Naruto, making the others smile at the scene in front of them. However, before the others did or said anything else, Naruto looked away and with a smile spoke again. "Note. From here on, the following humans are supposed to be under 10 years old, so to make the fic more bearable and believable, I'm going to make them older." "Oh, good morning, Lucy. On a scale from 1 to 10, how depressing was your morning?" Naruto greeted and asked his next 12-year-old sister. Said girl had hair so black that it seemed to absorb the light into endless darkness. The hair fell in long bangs that managed to cover the black-haired girl's eyes, giving her a more depressive and dark aura. However, as if that weren't enough, Lucy wore a simple all-black dress along with black and white striped stockings up to her thighs, along with gloves of the same design that covered almost her entire arm. "What can I tell you, today seems like it's going to be another depressing day. I hope it rains to take this day to another level," Lucy commented with a rather muffled voice, surprising the others who hadn't noticed her sister's presence, and well, that in itself was no longer a surprise, since not noticing the black-haired girl was so common that her entrances were so surprising and spontaneous that many thought it was some kind of witchcraft. However, that didn't seem to affect Naruto, since he always seemed to notice her, no matter how quiet and stealthy she was. "I'm happy for you. Oh, and how was the movie I bought you yesterday?" Naruto asked, causing one of the rare events with the black-haired girl to appear with a smile that equally pleased Naruto, who could only caress the head of the depressed girl. "It was pretty good, especially when the vampire broke his victims' necks," Lucy commented, drawing drops of sweat from those present who didn't know exactly what to say to the comment. However, Naruto simply nodded in acceptance. "True, that was quite realistic," Naruto replied to what the black-haired girl with a small blush proceeded to say. "Do you want to watch it with me?" Lucy asked, fiddling with her hands behind her back, a sign of nervousness at her older brother's response. "Sure, it could be fun watching it together," Naruto replied, lowering Lucy's spirits a little. However, she wasn't completely discouraged, since she was now planning to sit next to her in said movie, without knowing that the others were also thinking the same thing. "I've told you 1,000 times not to use my lipsticks to paint," was the complaint of a blonde with straight hair that fell to her back while wearing a princess crown on her head. The blonde herself was wearing an elegant pink dress with equally pink gloves and a bow on her left shoulder. The girl herself looked as if she were about to parade in a Miss Universe pageant. This was her next sister of 11 years that she shared with her twin, which at this moment she was shazzing furiously. However, there was a small detail, that was that although she had a twin, she was totally opposite to her, since instead of wearing a feminine dress she was wearing a jean bloomer. I don't remember what those clothes are called, so the only thing that came to my mind when I saw it was that, so for the moment I will call it that, and underneath it, she wore a moss green sweater, on her blonde hair tied in 2 pigtails she had on a cap turned backwards that Naruto had given her for her birthday. In itself, her complete outfit made her look like a mechanic, and to Naruto's further grace he compared them like Mario and Princess Peach. After all, the resemblance was painfully ironic. "It was your fault for leaving them in my bed," was the plumber twin's response as she hid behind Naruto, as if he were a shield. "But that didn't give you the right to use them as crayons," Princess complained again as slight tears appeared in the corners of her eyes, so deciding to calm the matter down, Naruto simply spoke. Okay, calm down, Lola. Later I'll buy some new lipsticks for my princess," Naruto reassured him while he stroked the head of the now mentioned Lola, who visibly calmed down while a small blush adorned her cheeks. "And Lana, what have I told you about using other people's things?" Naruto scolded the now recognized Lana, who simply pouted at the scolding. "Don't use them without permission because they might get angry," replied the little plumber, only to receive the pat on her head. Good girl." Naruto congratulated the smiling Lana, who went to her designated position next to Lola, while Naruto simply watched as his penultimate sister entered the scene while reading a quantum book that in itself was too complicated for anyone present to really understand what was inside. Now although she was only 10 years old, that did not mean that she was the smartest in the family, that fact was indisputable, since the girl had several awards in science events, where several scientists participated to affirm her intelligence, followed closely by a certain blonde brother who helped her in some of her projects. She had somewhat long brown hair that almost reached her lower back and wore a simple brown blouse along with jeans, and in her eyes, she wore glasses that increased her intelligent appearance. Note. Well, unfortunately, the images I found of her looked too young to the point that her age couldn't be hidden, so I tried to find an image that resembled her, but well, I wasn't very successful either, so here is an image that seemed adequate to me. "Good morning my pancakes," the girl was going to say only to be interrupted by Naruto, who simply sat in his seat while answering his sister. "They are heated to 35 degrees, and your bacon was steamed for 38 seconds at 28 degrees," Naruto informed with a smile while putting on some glasses, implying that he was in his intelligence mode, making his sister smile, who happily proceeded to sit down. "Just the way you like it, isn't it? Lisa," Naruto finished, causing the brunette to nod happily. "Good morning family, as you wake up," was the animated greeting that caught everyone's attention to a blonde woman of about 38 years old, while carrying a 1-year-old baby. This woman was presumably Naruto's stepmother, who was wearing a pink shirt along with brown jeans. On her face there was a smile that seemed almost eternal on her face, and well, her attitude was quite cheerful, and she tried to help her daughters and Naruto as much as she could. "Good morning, Mom," was the collective greeting that Rita received, who cheerfully proceeded to sit in her seat while leaving Naruto's last sister on a baby stool that possibly each and every one of the girls had used at some point. Well, to finish, there was the baby who was barely 1 year and 3 months old, so you could say in a certain sense that she was her father's last attempt to conceive a son, which resulted in a girl named Lily, who was now drinking a large amount of milk. "Today it's pancakes with bacon," Rita commented cheerfully as she brought a piece of pancake to her mouth, savoring the good taste of it. "Yes, I hope you like it," Naruto replied calmly as he watched his family eat happily. And so they spent the first few minutes of the morning in a comfortable familiar silence, while each problem seemed to really not matter at all. However, every good moment is simply that a moment, since in the middle of this comfortable silence, the sound of a cell phone ringing began to be heard, indicating that there was an incoming call. This obviously caught the attention of the girls, who could only turn their gaze in the direction of the blonde, who simply raised an eyebrow and then took out his cell phone and subsequently answered it. "Hello Erica, what do you need?" Naruto answered calmly and curiously, since he didn't expect a call from his boss. After all, today was his day off, so with curiosity, he waited to hear what she had to say. For about 20 seconds, Naruto kept listening to his boss's voice under the attentive gaze of everyone who knew about his day off and had planned to spend as much time as they could with his favorite brother. However, the blonde sigh of resignation caught the attention of everyone, who hoped it wasn't what they thought. "Okay, I'll be there in 25 minutes," Naruto replied, causing an awkward silence to fall over the family, who remained expectant of what Naruto was going to say as he hung up the call. "Well, I have to go to work," Naruto began, causing a tsunami of complaints to appear. "But today is your day off," complained an irate Lori as she stood up from the table with the others, who nodded at what she said. Well, all except for little Lily, who really didn't know much about the situation and instead continued drinking her milk. "Yes, I know, but it seems that Mr. Thompson won't be able to go to work, so they called me in his place," Naruto explained to the girls, who didn't seem satisfied with the reason why their Naruto had to go to work on the day he was supposed to rest. "That good for nothing old man again. It was the same last time, you should complain," was the next groan that came, this time from an annoyed Lola as she crossed her arms. "That young lady's mouth, but it's true, this is the 6th time they've done the same thing in the last 3 months, scolded Rita, who was equally irritated and couldn't bear to see how they wore down her precious Naruto. "I know you're right, but I can't afford to disobey my boss because I need the job," Naruto replied as he stood up from his position before the gaze of the girls, who could only bow their heads at what he said, because it was true. If Naruto were fired, they would once again be in a terrible situation financially speaking. Naruto, on the other hand, could only see the sadness in his stepsisters, so letting out a sigh, Naruto proceeded to speak. "How about on my next day off I buy some pizzas and sodas to watch that movie I bought for Lucy?" Naruto offered the girls, who just let out a sigh and then smiled in agreement, except for Lola, Lana, Lisa and Rita, who didn't know about the movie since at that time they hadn't arrived yet. So starting to walk, preparing to go to his room, Naruto was stopped by the next thing, a curious Lin said, who had gone to the door of the house to open it, only to see a package that had the name of a certain blonde that they wanted so much. "Huh? A package for Naruto?" was the question of a curious Lin as she tried to lift the certainly somewhat heavy package, while Naruto turned his gaze in her direction, only to see a familiar logo on the back of the box, causing a small cold sweat to run down her head. "Shit, why did the package arrive so early?" was Naruto's thought as he headed in the direction of the athlete and then took the package as calmly as he could muster. "What did you buy?" asked an excited Lana while jumping a little trying to grab the box. This seemed to interest the other sisters who also began to approach the blonde with the intention of opening the package. This? Well, I know this is a computer I bought for, well, you know, I thought it was a good idea to have one," and all Naruto lied as best he could, almost anxiously hoping they would swallow the lie. For a moment the tense silence grew heavier until they finally seemed to understand and simply nodded in understanding. "Well, I'm going to get ready before I'm late," said Naruto as he climbed the stairs with his package of mysterious origin on his right side, only being held by his equally straight Prezo. Once Naruto reached the door of his room, he quickly proceeded to open the door and then enter and obviously close the door. Once the door was closed behind our blonde, he visualized the familiar room with the walls covered with some kind of black sponges that had some kind of spikes. This had been put there to soundproof the room a little, and so that anyone outside of it could not hear what was happening inside, or at least not be able to understand what was being said inside. The room itself was somewhat small, in which his bed was, and there was still a piece of space left, which was now occupied by a desk that held a gaming PC, while some neon lights seemed to give it a futuristic aesthetic. This PC had actually been able to buy it with some savings that he had gathered since he was 13 years old, however the PS5. The Xbox Series X and the Nintendo Switch OLED that he had nicely accommodated under the desk had not been bought by him for the moment. Let's leave it as he got them in another way, and no, it was not in the way you are thinking. No, the way he got them has a slightly deeper story, so to speak. However, Naruto didn't pay much attention to his PC and instead simply took about 2 steps towards his bed and calmly proceeded to hide the box underneath so as not to be seen, although no one would see it since his room was, so to speak, Area 51 of the house. It was really strange in itself since in a certain sense all the women in the house seemed to have a small idea in their heads that told them that their room was a place they shouldn't enter or that they weren't allowed to enter. Certainly very strange since Naruto had no real problem with them entering the room. But leaving that thought for another time, Naruto let out a sigh and then stood up and looked at the time on his cell phone, which caused his eyes to widen because of how late it had become. "Shit, I'm late," Naruto said to himself as he approached a small hook nailed to the wall next to the PC and took the keys that were hanging lazily on them and then left his room, but not before closing the door to the room. He then turned around and went down the stairs without realizing that the door he was supposed to have closed opened slightly inwards, thus leaving a bit of the room to be seen. Going down the stairs quickly, Naruto jumped on the last 3 steps while dodging an amused Lini, who could only see her beloved stepbrother say goodbye to everyone who looked out from different places in the house. "Goodbye. I'm leaving now." Naruto said goodbye as he opened the door. "Goodbye. Take care," they all responded in unison as Naruto closed the door and walked to the garage of the house, in which there was a rusty car that he himself had rescued from a stable of old cars that no one bothered to look for or buy. This car was a 1969 Ford, and well, it should be noted that when he bought it for $4,000, the car itself had many faults, and well, after spending another $1,500 on used parts and 3 months, Naruto and his assistant, which was his sister Lana, were finally able to get it working. On one side of him was parked a family van that they affectionately called Vanzilla. In this van they had made all their trips, and it was the first car that the family had had. However, Naruto did not put much thought into the matter and instead simply approached his car and with a screech of rust, he opened the door to then get in and proceed to start the car that only took him 1 try to start, so getting out of reverse, our favorite blonde finally started his way to work. Chapter 2. Woods Plaza was exactly what it said, a plaza where multiple stores and businesses paid a monthly fee to be able to sell their wares, and in said plaza, in one of the many occupied spaces, was what every person who knew of the place was the most recurrent gym in the region. Above the place loomed a large sign that recognized the gym as Royal Fitness. However, every person who left or simply passed in front of the place turned their eyes in the direction of the familiar sound of the vehicle engine that roared with some force. Passers-by often noticed the 69 Ford park in a parking lot reserved for employees right in front of the store. In reality, some passers-by didn't give the rusty car a second glance and simply continued on their way. However, for other feminine women who were leaving the premises, possibly to return to their homes, they quickly turned around and went back inside upon recognizing the vehicle of a certain blonde teenager that they were hoping to see today. So turning off the car, our blonde protagonist took out the car keys and then took a backpack that was in the passenger seat, and with almost desperate speed, Naruto got out of the car and then entered the gym while he brought his work ID closer to a scanner that emitted an approval sound. "Just in time, nothing less could be expected from my star employee," was said by a somewhat playful female voice, causing Naruto to turn his gaze in the direction of the owner of the voice, only to see a woman with black hair down to her shoulders. Where her right eye should be there was an eye patch that covered it, and on her lips there was a cigarette while it twisted into a small flirtatious smile. The woman was wearing a white Fila brand sweater that reached just below her breasts, and along with it she wore tight black lycra pants while she looked at the time on her cell phone. This woman was his boss Miss Erica, who at this moment was 24 years old, quite young, to already have a pretty good business, and as for her nationality, well, she moved from Germany at 19 years old due to problems that she has never told him. Well, you know that I always like to arrive on time, Naruto responded simply as he adjusted his backpack on his shoulder and then began to walk next to his boss, who never dropped her small flirtatious smile. Oh yes, that's something that can't be argued with your rival history backing it up, Erica said calmly as she watched the blonde receive greetings from the different women in the gym, to which he responded with a charming smile. Truth be told, Naruto had never been late to work, and if he was going to do it, the reason for doing it was quite serious, and yet, those were a handful of times that could be counted on the fingers of one hand. Meanwhile, the two arrived at the men's locker room area, where, as the sign says, only men could enter. However, without Naruto realizing it, he was followed by a smiling Erica who didn't stop in the slightest in following him. Once they entered an empty locker room, Naruto simply walked in the direction of his favorite locker, which was in the second row of lockers in a corner at the back of the locker room. Once in front of his locker, Naruto proceeded to calmly open it, only for the blonde to suddenly feel the soft hands of the smiling black-haired girl begin to run down the sides of his abdomen as they slowly moved up to stop at his chest. Huh? Erica? What are you doing here? Naruto asked, knowing exactly what his boss was doing as he felt her press her body against his back, then poke her head out to the side of Naruto's head, who simply looked at her out of the corner of his eye and calmly proceeded to speak. Is this the real reason why you called me? Naruto asked with a serious and sharp voice, causing the black-haired girl to let out a small giggle, and without wasting another moment she separated from him, letting him turn in her direction with a serious face. Oh no, of course not, I could never be capable of taking another day away from you with your precious sisters for my own pleasure, Erica clarified with an equally serious tone, but without losing her small smile. For a moment, the two of them stared at each other for a few seconds, until Erica finally spoke again. That's why I fired that asshole Thompson, and I'm going to give you tomorrow off, informed the black-haired girl, to which Naruto opened his eyes a little as an indication of a small hint of surprise. However, this didn't surprise him beyond that, since the guy himself was missing a lot of work giving very weak excuses, and he was actually very glad that Erica had fired the faggot. After all, his laziness cost him a lot of time with his sisters and mother, and well, he had already thought about confronting him when he saw him again to warn him, and if the idiot got aggressive, well, that bastard was going to have to get some teeth put back in. After all, he was an obstacle that stood between him and the people he loved the most. I'm glad, was what a calm Naruto said, while inside was a chibi Naruto dancing the victory dance for having gotten rid of the idiot. Now why don't we talk about the terms of your raise? An excited Erica commented as she cornered Naruto between her and the lockers, as a clear indication that she was trying to be dominant. However, the height difference wasn't helping much since she was around 1.65 and Naruto was about 1.78, so they were in a big size difference. And what terms are we talking about? Naruto asked with veiled curiosity as he watched and felt Erica's hand slowly take Naruto's hands and guide them to her buttocks without taking her eyes off the blonde for even a second. Well, to start with, maybe I've been feeling a bit lonely these days, if you know what I mean, Erica began as she felt a small contraction of the blonde's hands, squeezing her buttocks a little. So I thought, why not have someone you could trust who could relieve that loneliness, and well, I kept wondering who this person could be. The answer I gave myself was so simple that I almost questioned my intelligence. That answer was you, Erica finished saying to the blonde, who at all times stared into the dark green eyes of her boss, who looked back at her with equal intensity. And what do you say? Erica asked with almost veiled anxiety at the answer the blonde would give her. However, Naruto instead proceeded to ask a question. Is this going to be totally professional? Naruto asked calmly, to which Erica remained silent for a moment while she analyzed the question and couldn't help but let out a small giggle before answering. I couldn't say that, but what I can tell you is that I'm going to try to keep this professional, Erica responded to Naruto, who remained silent until he finally let out a sigh. I hope this doesn't interfere between my family and me, Naruto said with resignation as Erica's flirtatious smile increased. Oh, believe me, he won't do it, Erica replied, and it was true. She was going to try to keep her promise as best she could. After all, if it weren't for Naruto, her business would never have gotten to where it was today. Even if he didn't know it, she owed him a lot. However, stopping to think about it, Erica stood on tiptoe and then joined her lips with the blonde in a passionate and warm kiss that she really enjoyed. This finally sealed the deal until one of them decided not to continue with it. 7 hours and 53 minutes later. Okay, try to keep your back straight, instructed a calm Naruto to a woman of about 28 years old who was currently doing squats while holding a metal bar between her shoulders. Could you help me keep my back straight?" the woman suggested to Naruto, who nodded and smiled, then approached the woman and gently placed his left hand on the woman's flat stomach and his right hand in the middle of her back while applying a little pressure, helping to keep her back straight. However, this also caused the woman's butt to stand out more every time she did a squat. "You're so good," the woman whispered with a dreamy voice, drawing the blonde's attention. "Excuse me, what did you say?" Naruto asked, wondering if he had really heard correctly. "Huh? Oh, if I say that you are quite good at this instructing thing," the woman corrected nervously, to which Naruto looked at her for a few more seconds until a beep began to sound from his watch, indicating that his 8 hours of work had ended. "Well, I guess that's all for today." Naruto changed the subject and then helped the woman once again to stand up, then removed her hands from her, who returned the metal bar to him, then turned her back on him in the most suggestive way he could. He leaned forward to take his water bottle while grazing Naruto's crotch, who could only let a drop of sweat fall at the woman's obvious suggestion. However, he was already used to these insinuations. After all, this was his daily bread. "See you another day, instructor," the woman said goodbye as she walked away from the blonde with a rather provocative sway of her hips. "Be sure, see you, Miss Smith." Naruto said goodbye, then felt his phone vibrate in his pocket, calling his attention. He then proceeded to take out his cell phone and turned it on to see a WhatsApp message. "Are you coming today, Naruto?" The blonde read mentally, then unlocked his cell phone and proceeded to answer the message with an "I'm sorry, I won't be able to go today. I'm busy." Waiting a few seconds, the other person finally responded with an "I understand, I'll tell the coach," replied the other person, to which Naruto simply locked his cell phone and then left the place. 3:04 p.m. Meanwhile, at the Loud residence. The door of this was open to reveal what were all the sisters of the blonde, who at this moment were returning from some very boring classes at school, so it is not enough to say that they were more than happy to get out of that hell for the day. However, there was something that would improve the day more apart from being with their favorite blonde, and that was a good and relaxing hot bath to relieve themselves of the quite low temperatures that the month of November provided. So, as if they were a stampede of zombies, each and every one of them went up the stairs as if they were rabid animals looking to be the first to take their refreshing bath. "You were first this morning," were the girls' new moans as they rolled in a comical cloud of dust. "But I'm the oldest, so just play by the rules," was the next whine that echoed in the hallway from a certain older blonde-haired girl. "You already used that excuse this morning. So stay back, old woman," replied another of the girls, while a somewhat disheveled and scratched Luna was thrown out of the cloud of dust. "Ay. Damn, that hurt," an angry Luna was going to say. However, whatever she was about to say, the rocker stopped when something she had never seen crossed her sight, so trying to get the girls' attention she spoke. "Yeah, girls," called the brunette without really a hint of success, so trying once more she spoke again. "Girls. Look." Luna called again, however this didn't seem to work, so with a vein popping out of her forehead, she screamed like a true rocker. "Girl." Luna shouted quite loudly, causing any argument that was in progress to stop in its tracks to look at the rocker in confusion. "What?" asked a curious Lisa, not knowing what could be more important than a good shower. However, the next thing the girls saw when Luna pointed with her hand made any interest they had in taking a shower disappear completely, since in front of them was something they couldn't believe. The door of their favorite brother was open to what for all of them was a totally mysterious world. "The door is open," whispered an almost trance-like Lola, who couldn't believe what she was seeing at this moment. After all, there hadn't been a single time when Naruto had forgotten to close the door to his room. "Yes, it's open," confirmed an equally astonished Luin, who for the first time in her life didn't think about telling a joke, and instead the only thing on her mind was that small thin opening between the door and the frame of this. "What should we do?" asked a nervous Lin, who didn't really know what to do since, although this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that hadn't been seen until now, there was also the fact that they were going to be invading the privacy of their favorite blonde, and they didn't know if this was going to bother him, because if it turned out that way they were going to feel really bad. "Lisa, how long until Naruto arrives?" asked the monotonous voice of the always emo Lucy, thus drawing everyone's attention to what she was planning. "Well, it's 3:10, we have about 15 to 20 minutes before he gets home," replied the intelligent of the sisters, receiving a nod from the black-haired emo, who simply walked in the direction of the blonde's room. "What are you doing?" asked a strangely nervous Lana, causing everyone to nod curiously. "Isn't it obvious?" "I'm going in," Lucy replied without stopping at all, leaving behind a few silent sisters who looked at each other until finally they all followed her example and proceeded to walk until they were in front of the room. "Okay, are you ready?" Lucy asked, not really caring if they were ready. However, the silence was enough for the brunette to take it as a clear yes, so she slowly opened the door until it was wide open. Silence fell over the small hallway when the first thing that caught the girls' attention was the striking gamer PC that kept its neon lights on, almost lazily giving a little illumination to the dark room. For a more specific idea of what the room is like, "It can't be, that's a Viper GR5000 was what an astonished Lisa said, while suddenly she was in front of the PC, almost as if she was about to praise the machine in front of her. "The what?" asked a confused Lini, not understanding what her sister was talking about. "Don't you know what this is? This is possibly the most powerful gaming PC in the world," the four eyes informed effusively and then moved the mouse, causing the screen to light up, revealing a wallpaper of all of them, along with Rita and him on that trip they went on, in which he paid most of the expenses. This seemed to melt everyone's hearts. However, something caught the attention of a curious Lori. A feeling of discomfort in the back of her neck made her frown as she walked slowly until she was in front of the PC and then turned her back to the computer and visualized the room from that angle, and as if it were an electric shock again that feeling of discomfort ran through her mind. It was like that feeling of having seen that place before at some point in her sight and not knowing where, but it did not make sense since Naruto turned 12 years old and stopped sleeping with him occasionally with his sisters. They had not entered this room again, well, that along with the fact that their parents scolded them, saying that they could not be sleeping with their brother so often since at their ages they could become very inventive, and well, in itself their mother was not so wrong. Since at that age she had already thought about convincing Naruto to give her a kiss, too bad she could not find the right time to ask him. However, the room no longer looked anything like it had before, and yet, he still felt that discomfort of having seen the room in front of him not long ago. However, his thoughts were interrupted when a curious Lin made a statement that diverted his thoughts of discomfort. Wait, Naruto had said that the package that had arrived today was a computer, but Lin was going to say to be interrupted by an equally curious Moon. But when Naruto went up to leave it didn't take him more than 2 minutes to get down, Luna continued, while she connected the dots with the others, who were also starting to think about the matter. Very little time to be able to unpack, connect and configure a computer, finished a deductive Lewin, while she watched as a certain blonde in plumber's clothes rummaged through Naruto's dirty clothes until she found a pair of boxers. "Hey. Leave that," scolded a blushing Lewin, causing everyone to turn their gaze in that direction, causing everyone's face to turn a shade of scarlet red. "Give me that here," ordered a blushing Lori as she grabbed one end of the boxer and began to pull. This was followed by the others who also grabbed the poor boxer that ended up flying across the room until it mysteriously and by the work of the plot ended up under the bed. So as if it were the last piece of pizza, they all rushed under the bed in an uncontrolled fight until little by little they calmed down and calmly backed away from under the bed with a certain package that they had seen this morning. "Well, it wasn't a very clever hiding place," said a calm Lori as she stealthily hid Naruto's boxers in a pocket. "He shouldn't have worried so much about the matter after all, he always closes the door," Lola commented, adding a bit of logic to the hide and seek situation. "Shall we open it?" Lin asked, curious to know what was really inside the box that Naruto didn't want them to know. "I don't think that's a good idea, the box is sealed, he'll realize that someone opened it," Luna replied as the voice of reason. "No need to worry, I can replace the tape with a similar one," Lisa reassured, not really containing her curiosity about what the box contained. However, before they could do anything more than look at the box, they could all hear the door of the house open, implying one thing: Naruto had arrived. This seemed to press a switch, each of the girls wasting no time, and put the box back under the bed and tidy up the bed, which had become disorganized after their little skirmish under it. As if there was a ghost in the room, they all went out, then slammed the door and fanned out down the small hallway, while acting as normal as they could, just in time for a curious Naruto to peek out from under the stairs. Is everything okay, girls?" Naruto asked with an eyebrow raised at the curious scene in front of him. Curiously, everyone was in the small hallway as if this was the most surprising thing they had ever seen in their entire lives. Yes. Everything is fine, isn't it, girls?" replied a smiling Lori, who thought that at any moment her face would split because of how forced the smile was. "Yes, everything is fine," they all answered in unison, while Naruto raised his eyebrow more when he seemed to see how the always sporty Lin let Lola paint her nails, the always melancholic Lucy played with Lana's frog stuffed animal, who was using Lori's cell phone, who was helping an apparently confused Lisa with a math problem. This was undoubtedly one of the strangest scenes he had ever seen in his entire life. "Uki, I guess I'll go sit down and watch a horror movie by myself while I finish the 6 family pizzas that are downstairs," Naruto commented, calmly ignoring said scene and pretending he never saw it, and then started to go down the stairs, and as if it were a tsunami, they began to hear the footsteps of the girls who went down the stairs as fast as they could, completely forgetting the fact that they had violated the privacy of their favorite blonde, and instead they started again with a fight to see who would sit next to Naruto. "I'm going to Naruto's side," demanded an angry Lewin. "So many bad jokes must have burned your brain, I'm going to sit next to Naruto," claimed an equally angry Lisa. "Excuse me? "I think your calculations are wrong because I'm the one who will be next to him," demanded an annoyed Luna. This was heard by Naruto, who was finishing closing the curtains of the windows to put more atmosphere in the place, and well, Naruto was not going to intervene in their discussions after all. It was not a good idea to get involved in women's arguments. So instead Naruto simply dropped two of the queen-sized spare mattresses between the couch and the television, and without really caring about the girl's argument, the blonde simply took a slice of pizza and let the movie start, thus drawing the attention of the girls who saw the blonde lying in the middle of the mattresses while chewing a slice of pizza. "What? Aren't they coming?" Naruto asked with a certain degree of amusement as he watched everyone rush towards him while they settled down until finally they were all around the blonde. 58 minutes later. Naruto watched a movie with a certain degree of surprise at how entertaining it turned out to be, however his thoughts were distracted when he felt a scared knee cling to his arm in a particular scene, where a man with a triangle head and a butcher sword skinned a person, and as if they all realized what was happening, they still clung to the blonde in a group hug while screaming in fear, and although the scene didn't cause them that much fear it was still something terrifying to see and it wasn't that expensive to fake some screams of fear. As for Naruto, he simply remained with a chibi expression on his face while he felt the heat of the girls' bodies cling to him. Well, this was pretty good, Naruto wouldn't deny that, but changing the subject, about 48 more minutes had passed since that scene and the movie was in its last scenes until it finally ended with an open ending, implying that the movie had other parts. "Well, the movie was pretty good," Naruto commented calmly as his sisters slowly separated from the blonde until they were finally free of the group hug. "Let's watch another one?" asked an excited Lana while receiving some nods from the other girls, except for a quiet Lori. "Leave Naruto alone, he's tired of work, so let him rest," scolded the oldest sister of the group, drawing a groan of annoyance from the others. Okay, calm down, we'll have more time to spend together. For now, go to sleep because tomorrow you have to go to school." Naruto calmed down, not really feeling the tired since his only job was to instruct the people at the gym and well, there were times when he had to give them a physical example of how to do it, but beyond that, he didn't have much to do at work, so to speak, it was a fairly simple job with good pay. "Okay," they all answered in unison with hints of disappointment at not being able to spend more time with their favorite brother, so without further ado the girls began to disperse through the house, leaving only a restless Lori, who seemed to catch the attention of the blonde who simply stayed there, waiting to know what his stepsister would say to him. "By the way, Naruto, tomorrow I'm meeting some friends at the mall, and I wanted to know if," a nervous Lori tried to say without much success, however Naruto just gave her a smile and then responded. "Sure, I'll take you. What time do you want me to take you?" Naruto asked, to which Lori's face lit up with happiness since she could be alone with him for a few moments. 3:30 is fine, Lori replied as she gave Naruto a quick hug and then quickly went up the stairs to her room. "Well, I'd better go back into my cave too," the mustachioed man said to himself with a smile as he started to climb the stairs towards his room, which had been raided a few hours ago. However, for the perpetrators, they were more than sure that the blonde wasn't going to notice anything at all. After all, they had fixed his room with the smallest possible precaution down to the last millimetric measurement of how it was before they entered the room, or well, that was what they had thought, since the room itself had a detail that curiously our blonde hadn't taken into account at this moment. So calmly the blonde simply approached his closet and then removed a towel from over it that seemed to be covering something. Once he removed it, he revealed an air conditioner powerful enough to cool the room, because if not every time he used his PC, it would overheat too quickly, and to not raise suspicions, he was the one in charge of paying the electricity in the house, therefore no one would notice that the electricity had increased a little. So turning it on, Naruto approached his PC and calmly sat in his chair to then enter the password and begin a quiet configuration. So after about 18 minutes using the PC, Naruto finally opened a drawer in the desk to take out a microphone which he connected to the PC. Then Naruto moved the mouse until it was on a button that said "Start," not before now looking for a mask along with some glasses and put them on and calmly comb his hair back so that it does not look so much like the one he usually wears. Without wasting time, Naruto finally pressed a button to start while putting background music that he had been in charge of creating and simply waited a couple of minutes until finally the counter in a corner of the screen began to go up from 0 to 15, from 15 to 70, from 70 to 247, from 247 to 894, from 894 to 2378, and it went up until it reached a total of 3,789,875 viewers. All that lasted around 24 minutes, however those were not all, however they were enough to start the live. Well, we reached 2 million in record time," Naruto said calmly as he lazily spun around in his chair watching the chat as people messaged whatever came to mind. "How about you put smiley faces in the chat so the people on Twitch can't see that we're good people?" Naruto said with amusement as he watched the chat suddenly fill with somewhat disturbing smiley faces, bringing a funny smile to the blonde. But this we're sure to convince them, Naruto said with amusement and some sarcasm, while an animation appeared on the screen, calling Naruto's attention that someone had made a donation of $2. Damn kid, I stopped working to watch the live show number. The robotic voice of the narrator was heard reading the donation comments. Hahaha. Nuo. Get a job instead of watching some idiot play video games, what do we do with our lives? People. Naruto said with amusement while the chat took the comment as it really was, a joke. Well today I feel like playing Battlefield 5, what do you think? Asked the blonde only to notice how the chat responded with affirmations and denials, so raising an amused eyebrow Naruto simply shrugged his shoulders. Yes. No okay yes then no okay you know I'm going to do a survey informed the blonde to type some things on the PC until finally 2 bars appeared that were filling up until finally the result was an almost equal no. Very well then that's a no what do you think Naruto was going to say, however before he spoke again, the animation appeared on the screen, indicating another donation valued at $10. Hey Speedy Fox, play Dead Space 3 on impossible difficulty read the robotic voice, leaving the blonde in a thoughtful silence as he watched the chat quickly respond with yes, or you play, or it opens this in itself made Naruto let out a small chuckle. What you want is to see me suffer what assholes you are said Naruto with amusement while he turned to see how many viewers he had and well it seems that the vast majority had already joined the stream since he had around 5 million viewers out of the 8 million he had in total, but well, not everyone could connect to watch his live at this time. Well then Dead Space 3 it will be said Naruto calmly as he took the controller of his Xbox Series X to proceed to turn it on while putting the game disc in the slot. Let me share the screen and that's it, how does it look? Naruto asked, receiving responses that everything looked fine. Okay then let me change the difficulty okay, everything's ready well then let's start I hope you enjoy seeing me suffer heartless bastards, was what Naruto said before the game started and along with it a new donation was present. But you still love us was the donation read by the computer that curiously was from a possible girl, judging by the female name, while Naruto gave them a giggle. True I won't deny it you guys are my assholes and assholes of course oh and by the way, thanks for the $5 Stephanie 477. Now when Naruto did these live streams Naruto collected around $465, well that was in his best days a quite considerable sum if you looked at it in a more objective way and well, this could be considered his second job. However let's say that Naruto did not get much juice out of this Twitch thing, since in itself, he did not earn more than the other streamers who had contracts with the same creators of the platform, after all they had not contacted him, and well, Naruto really did not believe that he would accept the offer after all. He did this for simple fun and as a way to de-stress and well the blonde started live whenever he wanted not like the others who had to start live even if they did not want to due to contract issues and well, that would no longer feel like something that you really like so that is why he had not really thought about accepting the offer or well maybe he would negotiate it until reaching an agreement in which he felt comfortable. But for the moment he would do it his way and the donations that was an extra bonus. Chapter 3. 12:28 a.m. V come on. What's happening? Move faster idiot. Were the contained screams of a certain blonde who at this moment found himself with his heart beating 100 times thanks to a certain game that was putting his nerves on edge, after all he was in a particularly difficult part of the game and that was not all since, thanks to the difficulty level he was playing, he was not allowed to save the game, along with the fact that ammunition was something scarce in the game. Hi Speedy Fox, can you say hello to my friend Brain? He's probably watching your stream on a stolen phone. The $30 donation was read by the computer. Now. I send my greetings to your friend. Buck die already. The blonde responded while frantically trying to kill the mini-boss that was trying to kill him, non-stop, however, after about 17 minutes of pure and raw agony, Naruto was finally able to kill the devil creature that almost screwed up his entire game. Ass shit are you happy? I almost had a heart attack trying to get through this part, was what Naruto said who absent-mindedly looked at the time on the side of the computer, only to see that it was already 3 in the morning, therefore it was time to end the live, and another day he would edit a video to upload it to his YouTube channel, so looking back at the chat, Naruto proceeded to say goodbye. Okay, people I'm going to finish the live stream so see you next time, said the blonde, not before listening to the next donation. Speedy Fox when are you going to make a sub, do you send videos? The donor asked curiously to which Naruto took his chin for a moment while he watched the chat affirming the question until he finally answered. I don't know last time they almost deleted my Twitch account because of the videos they sent on Discord, I don't know if I should risk it, commented the blonde, noticing that the chat was starting to send angel faces, indicating that he was going to behave well. Okay, fine, but the next faggot who sends porn videos live, I'm going to ban him, was what Aiz Naruto said, as he remembered the countless times his account was almost deleted, thanks to those subscribers who like to screw with the streamers, but thanks to the fact that he always had his finger ready to remove the video at the slightest suspicion of an inappropriate video, although of course his eyesight was not enough to react to such videos. Naruto's intuition was another factor to take into account, so when he saw a suspicious video, he would simply watch it separately until he was sure that everything was okay, and well, most of the time he realized that it was a suspicious video when they weren't very long. After all, those videos weren't meant to last long. But since I have to go to the bathroom, so see you next time, Naruto said goodbye, reading the last comments and then proceeding to end the live. For a moment Naruto stared at a counter at the top right of the screen with a dollar sign indicating that said counter showed the amount collected from donations, and well, Naruto had to admit that today he earned a considerably good sum. If the $385 was anything to go by, this together with his salary from his job made up a pretty good sum if you took the time to do the math. Now, as previously mentioned, Naruto earned $2,000 monthly at work, but in the case of earnings from his second live job, well, his earnings were never really precise, since the frequency with which he did live broadcasts was around 2 to 3 live broadcasts per week, and the earnings he managed to gather in all those live broadcasts together could be around $2,100 monthly, and if we add that up with what he earns at his job, well, you should already be getting an idea of how much he earned. Although Naruto earned a pretty juicy amount of money for his age, enough to buy anything he wanted, there were still 11 reasons why our blonde didn't spend his money on himself, and those reasons were his sisters and his mother who needed his support, something that Naruto wouldn't hesitate even once to provide. After all, they were the most important thing in his life, and as long as he didn't see their happiness wither away, Naruto would be willing to do anything to protect those smiles. But stopping to think about it, Naruto simply turned around with the clear intention of going to do his business. However, before taking the handle of his door, there was something that caught his attention, something quite simple that he hadn't noticed before, but that could influence the aesthetics of his room. That something was the sheet on his bed. Now, although there was nothing strange about the sheet itself, the way it was placed was, after all, he never placed the sheet with a long side at the sides of the bed, and this morning he was sure that it had not been the exception. Really, that small and imperceptible detail had never crossed his mind, which obviously made a small sweat run down his forehead. Well, a thought crossed his mind. Someone entered the room was the fleeting thought that left an incomparable chaos in his head. Well, he thought fervently who of all could have been the one who entered his room. However, once again, like an electric shock in his memory, a scene that he had decided to pretend he had not seen returned from the deepest recesses of his mind, hitting him like the punch of a professional boxer, and that was the strange scene of the girls in the hallway. So without further ado, Naruto stood there in his room asking himself multiple questions until he finally let out a sigh and instead simply opened the door and began to walk in the direction of the bathroom. Well, it really wasn't that important that the girls could enter his room. What worried him was that they would discover his other source of income, since his family was quite famous for how numerous it was, being considered the largest with 6 members above the second largest family. Therefore, it was not surprising that most of the masses in Royal Woods knew his family, which obviously led to them knowing him. Entering the bathroom, the blonde quickly noticed that he was still wearing his mask and glasses that represented his character in the vast and endless internet. He proceeded to take them off, but while leaving that for a moment, Naruto simply took out his tool with a size that could surpass that bold guy that everyone talks about and comments that works on that graphic pornographic page on the internet, although well, he really hadn't taken the interest in measuring and comparing his member. But well, leaving it to think about it, Naruto was about to leave the bathroom when the familiar body odor of his body reached his nose, causing it to wrinkle from the slight smell of sweat, and although many of the women who went to the gym commented that he really didn't smell bad when he sweated, there was still that feeling of feeling sticky, so without anything else to think about, the blonde proceeded to take a good bath. 15 minutes later. That was refreshing, Naruto said as he got out of the bathtub while taking one of the towels that were neatly stored in a small piece of furniture inside the bathroom, so wrapping it around his waist, Naruto proceeded to leave the bathroom and calmly walk to the door of his room. However, before the blonde could open his door, the sound of another door opening caught his attention. So turning his gaze in that direction, the only thing the blonde could see was a sleepy Lana, while an apparently terrified Lola hid behind her twin sister. This in itself caught the blonde's attention because of the peculiar scene. However, the fact that the two didn't seem to notice his presence made a mischievous smile appear on his mustachioed face, so with careful and agile steps, Naruto slowly approached the twins, who still continued without noticing his presence and instead only whispered. Come on Lola, you should know that nothing that happened in that movie is real," complained the sleepy Lana, who simply let herself be pushed by her sister, who used her as a shield. "And how do you know that?" asked a rhetorical Lola while she pushed her sister more impatiently to get to the kitchen quickly and get a drink of water. I don't know exactly, that's what Lisa said, Lon replied, covering herself with the smartest of the sisters. Are you sure about that? Was the hoarse and rather eerie voice that the twins heard behind them, causing them to stop in their tracks while a cold sweat ran down their foreheads and a shiver ran through their bodies that didn't seem to react to the terror they now felt. However, in this situation, the only thing they could manage to do was open their mouths and try to scream with all their might. However, two hands quickly placed on the mouths of the two girls, thus stifling the scream of terror. Both of them could only see how above them the smiling face of a certain blonde appeared. Hey, calm down, it's me, Naruto calmed down as he noticed how Lana and Lola's bodies weakened until they finally fell to the floor as a sign of fainting, leaving an awkward silence in which Naruto simply stood there watching his two sisters fainted on the floor, a drop of sweat running down his temple. I think I went too far, was what the mustachioed man said as he proceeded to pick up the two blondes and calmly start walking down the stairs towards the kitchen. 7 minutes later. Hey? What happened? Where am I? Where is my perfect life with Naru? Were the questions of a shocked Lola who looked around while she abruptly stood up from her previous faint until she noticed that a certain blonde brother was looking at her with a funny smile, and for a moment the two simply stared at each other for about 20 seconds until Lola finally looked away while a small blush adorned her cheeks. I didn't say anything, whispered an embarrassed Lola who tried fervently to calm her blush. Oh? Really? Because I thought I heard something a bit curious, Naruto commented innocently, while the blush on Lola's cheeks intensified upon knowing exactly what Naruto was trying to do, so letting her cheeks swell in a cute pout, the blonde princess crossed her arms and then said. What you heard was a sneeze, Lola whispered, her embarrassment at its peak when she saw Naruto looking at her with a hint of mockery, until she finally nodded. I guess you're right, Naruto replied, only for a shocked Lana to abruptly wake up while in the process scaring her twin, who let out a small squeal at the gasp next to her produced by her sister, who didn't know she was next to her until now. However, she seemed to recover the notion of her surroundings faster, judging by how quickly she disappeared from next to Lola and was now glued hugging a blonde who could only stroke her head to calm her down. Naruto. There's a monster in the house. Lana informed with slightly teary eyes, drawing a drop of sweat from Naruto in the process. Now calm down, that was me who scared you, Naruto informed calmly, while the blonde seemed to stay still until finally her fear-filled face was replaced by a smile. Thank goodness, that was good. Naruto almost gave me a heart attack from fear, Lana said with amusement without really stopping hugging the blonde by her abdomen, that now that she took it into account, she could feel every muscle hidden behind that sweater, since the blonde in the time that the two had been fainted, went to get dressed, so with a small blush, Lola's counterpart stopped hugging Naruto while playing with her fingers. Note. In my country, we use the word faracho as a term that means someone gave us a really big scare. So you were going to do something in the kitchen? Naruto asked, causing the two to remain silent, trying to remember the reason why they had left so late until they finally remembered. Oh right, I was going to drink some water, said a now calm Lola as she stood up from a rather old and worn-looking sofa in the living room and began to walk towards the kitchen. However, on her way Lola stopped her walk so that slowly and with a nervous smile, she turned her gaze towards Naruto. Naruto, will you join me? Lola asked Naruto, who simply stood up from another equally old-looking chair and then walked to Lola's side, who took the hand of the blonde who accompanied her to the kitchen. Hey, don't leave me behind. Asked a scared Lana who ran towards the two. A couple of minutes later and everything was done, the girls had drunk water along with a Naruto who also wanted to drink water, and well, in reality nothing else had happened, apart from some jokes here and there about the scare that the two had suffered, so at this moment the three of them were going up the stairs while letting out small whispered laughs. Oh, by the way, you can tell the others in the morning that today is my day off, so I'm going to get up late, Naruto said calmly to the two who looked at him in surprise, since from what they knew their day off was yesterday, and because of that scum of an employee their blonde had lost his day off. Huh? But wasn't your day off yesterday? A curious Lana asked as they stood in front of her and her sister's room. Yeah, well, Erica made an exception this time and half the morning is free, Naruto informed, to which Lola and Lana looked at each other and then a smile of happiness adorned their faces until from one moment to another, their happy faces changed to a bitter one when they remembered that today, they had to go to school. Thank goodness there were only 3 weeks left until school ended and the holidays came. Well, in any case, Naruto wished to start walking in the direction of his room which was right next to theirs, however the two could only watch as Naruto calmly took the door handle and then opened it and entered his room. Turning around, Naruto gave them one last smile, however before Naruto could close the door, the voice of a nervous Lana caught his attention. Then Lana called nervously to Naruto, who opened the door a little to get a better look at the blonde who could only lightly play with her fingers. Yes. Naruto asked curiously at what Lana was going to say, however nothing was said by the blonde for the next 20 seconds until she finally gathered all the courage she had and proceeded to ask the question. I was wondering if we could sleep with you finally after much stuttering and hesitation she asked, involving a now equally nervous Lola, who didn't think Lana was going to ask that. What are you doing? A nervous Lola whispered to her counterpart only for the latter to not respond due to all her nervousness, however any reply that was about to come out of her mouth was silenced when Naruto's voice appeared. Sure, come in, Naruto replied to the two blondes who froze at the answer and then opened the door as a clear indication that they could enter, and for a moment neither of the two emitted a sign of life and they simply stood there until finally, a happy Lana ran in the direction of the blonde's room and then entered and jumped on his bed. Aren't you coming, Lola? Naruto asked the little princess who, like her sister, also had a big smile and with quick steps proceeded to enter the room while Naruto closed the door behind him while a yawn came out of his mouth. Well, it's time to sleep, was the last thing Naruto said. Time skip 7 a.m. It was already 7 a.m. and as usual, once again like every morning at 7 a.m., the commotion was present in the small hallway, only unlike previous mornings, today two more people were missing who at this moment were frowning in annoyance, because even though the covering on the walls prevented the sound from outside from entering and vice versa, the scandal could still be heard, implying that the scandal was too loud. Ugh, are we really that loud? A sleepy Lola wondered as she stopped hugging Naruto's side. Don't even tell me, I can't believe it either, replied an equally sleepy Lana, who peeked her head out from under the same loose sweater of a sleeping Naruto, who seemed unfazed by the noise. That's right, Lana was under Naruto's sweater, however Lola didn't give it much importance at the moment, either because of her drowsiness or because her mind was still processing what was happening. I'm going to shut them up, said an annoyed Lola as she got out of bed and walked slowly to the door. I'll go with you, Lana offered as she stepped on top of Naruto so that he could get out of bed and walk towards Lola, who was already in the process of opening the door, thus letting more noise into the room. Meanwhile with the others. Excuse me. This beauty can't stand on itself, so get out of my way. Yelled an annoyed Lori as she tried to get into the bathroom. Beauty? Where is she that I don't see her? So you remained second in the school princess candidate? Replied an annoyed Luna. For your information, that only happened because I didn't have time to get ready, Lori was going to reply, however just as she was about to finish her reply, another somewhat shrill voice that curiously didn't come from where they were silenced them, causing them all to turn their eyes in that direction to see a sleepy Lola. Will you be shut up? Can't you see that you're not letting you sleep? Lola scolded with annoyance to the others who could only stare at the blonde princess while her counterpart peeked out with equal annoyance. Yes, others try to sleep, Lana replied equally and then closed the door to Naruto's room with some force that resonated in the now silent hallway that kept some totally astonished sisters. Did they just peek out of Naruto's room? A surprised Lini asked the other girls, who could only nod robotically in affirmation. Yes, so it seems, was the response of Alin, who was in the process of processing what happened along with the others who could only do one thing. What do you think you're doing? They all shouted as a wave rushed towards the blonde's door, which was slammed open, and then threw himself onto Naruto's bed, causing the weight of everyone to make a certain blonde comically jump out of bed, causing him to land on his face on the cold floor, while leaving a line of blood where his face passed. This was seen by all without exception, leaving them once again in silence. Ugh, what happened? Naruto asked with evident pain in his voice as he slowly got up before the attentive gaze of everyone who could see how drops of blood dripped from where his nose seemed to be, followed by the blonde who ran a finger over his nostrils to notice a lot of blood, indicating an injury on his nose. However, Naruto was not too worried since after a more superficial inspection, he noticed that his Naruto had not broken or anything like that. So turning his gaze in the direction of the perpetrators, they now seemed to tremble slightly. Are you girls okay? Naruto was going to ask, however he couldn't finish because in less than a second they were all around him while they seemed to be about to cry. Then Naruto, are you okay? Asked a worried Lin while trembling she didn't know what to do with her hands. I'm sorry Naruto, we didn't mean to do that, apologized a scared Lin at the idea of being hated by Naruto, and so they continued asking about his well-being and apologizing to him, while some seemed to be about to collapse in tears, so seeing that it was a prudent moment to speak, Naruto proceeded to speak. Hey, calm down, I'm not angry, this was just an accident, Naruto reassured the girls who stared at him, while some of them breathed heavily so their snot wouldn't come out. Aren't you angry? Asked a teary-eyed Lisa. Of course not, I couldn't be anyway, Naruto replied with a reassuring smile. Do you promise? Asked an equally tearful Lini, to which Naruto did not waver in his smile. I promise, Naruto replied, visibly calming the girls, who could only let out a group sigh. Well, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to look for toilet paper to clean my nose, Naruto said, starting to leave the room, only to be followed by the others who saw him enter the bathroom, and not a second later the sound of water became present, implying that Naruto was using the sink. For a moment, no one said anything until the group of girls turned their gazes in the direction of a curious Lola and Lana, who only raised an eyebrow at the sudden attention. Why were you sleeping with Naruto? A serious Lori asked her two younger sisters, who only returned her look with a look of victory. Oh? Jealous? Asked a smiling Lola while enjoying the small victory she had. Lori is right because they were in Naruto's room? Asked an equally serious Luna, being accompanied by the nods of the others who also had a serious frown. We just asked if we could sleep with him, replied a carefree Lana, causing silence in the hallway once again. And nothing else? Lewin asked now with curiosity. Exactly, just ask, Lana replied calmly, while the others looked on attentively. That's all? Are you sure? Asked an equally curious Lisa, since according to her calculations, the probability was less than 0.00001% that it would work. Yes, I'm sure, Lana replied again, and then everyone could hear the bathroom shower running water, indicating that Naruto was taking a bath. And was he upset? Or did he put on an annoyed face? Asked a now silent Lucy, scaring everyone who had forgotten her presence again. Eh? Well, not really, to be more specific, he gave us that smile that we all like, Lola responded, this time remembering that smile once again, while her face transformed into a dreamy one. Lisa? How can this be possible? I thought that entry to that room was forbidden. Asked a hysterical Lori to her smarter sister, who at that moment was doing calculations in a notebook, while smoke seemed to come out of her head until she finally looked up. I got it. Lisa said with wide eyes, making everyone pay attention to the answer. My calculations and assumptions indicate that after that time when we were scolded for sleeping too much with him, our minds unconsciously incorporated that scolding as a pattern that we couldn't break. Therefore, the fact that we couldn't enter Naruto's room was simply an order that we gave ourselves, Lisa replied to the others, causing for the umpteenth time an awkward silence that was only broken by the sound of the bathroom door opening. Which caught everyone's attention to a blonde man in a towel. I'm done, you can use the bathroom, said Naruto, while a small piece of paper was stuck in his nose that seemed to be a little red. However, the girls simply stared at the piece of meat sculpturally carved by the Olympian gods themselves in front of them. For them it was almost as if the body itself seemed to be radiating sacred lighting that purified any evil that surrounded them. By the way, why don't they use the bathroom from youngest to oldest and rotate successively each day? Naruto suggested calmly, then walked past the astonished girls to go in the direction of his room to get some clothes. I think I'm blind, was the only thing said by a stunned Lin. 7:48 a.m. After the bathroom was quietly used for the first time in a long time, everyone was now silently having breakfast in the dining room, while a curious Rita seemed to notice that particular lack of animosity that characterized every morning in the Loud family, so with her curiosity eating away at her, she proceeded to ask. Very well, so are you going to tell me what's going on? Asks the curious Rita, making everyone except Naruto tense up at the question that no one wanted to answer. However, our blonde protagonist decided to answer the question. Well, from what I know, the final exams are near, they must be thinking about it. Naruto gave an answer of what he thought was happening, without knowing that his answer was too wrong, and instead he was the reason for the girl's silence. Could that be it, Naruto? What happened to your nose? He said and asked a worried Rita, barely noticing the blood-stained paper stuck in the blonde's nose, who only managed to scratch the back of his neck. Oh, this, well, you see, I fell out of bed, and nervous, Naruto responded with a half-truth that didn't hurt anyone. However, something caught Rita's attention, and that was the fact that it was already 8 in the morning, and Naruto still hadn't left for work, so turning her gaze back to Naruto, this time in panic, she proceeded to speak. Naruto? You're going to be late for work. And you haven't gotten ready. Said a panicked Rita, who only saw how Naruto finished chewing his breakfast and then swallowed calmly. Calm down, Mayurika gave me the day off, so Naruto was going to say, only for the ringing of his cell phone to interrupt him, so proceeding to unlock his cell phone, Naruto proceeded to mentally read the following WhatsApp message. Hello, Naruto. The coach is upset because you couldn't go yesterday, Naruto read calmly, while letting out a mental sigh under the attentive gaze of the girls who only saw their favorite brother chatting with who knows who. Hello Luz, how are you? Well, what did you want me to do? I was busy, Naruto replied, while the now mentioned Luz quickly began to write. If you already know how he is, you can't argue with him too much because he'll just flat out crack you, Luz responded as she started writing again. Hey, by the way, the coach scheduled another training session today at 10 o'clock. Are you going to go? Luz asked Naruto, who remained thoughtful for a moment until he finally decided to answer. "Of course, I'm free today so I'll be there," Naruto replied calmly, receiving a smiley emoji in return so, leaving his cell phone aside, Naruto simply continued with his breakfast before the expectant gaze of everyone who looked at him intensely. "Well?" Luna asked with a rather grim smile, causing Naruto to look up curiously. "So what?" Naruto asked curiously as a vein appeared on everyone's forehead. "Who were you talking so animatedly with?" Lori asked now with a certain degree of irritation, while Naruto remained still for a moment until he finally proceeded to answer. "I was just talking to Anthony. I wonder if he had seen the boxing gloves," he answered as calmly as he could muster, however the slight sweat that ran down his forehead was an indication that his effort was cosmic and this was noticed by everyone who could only think. He's lying, they all thought in unison as they devised plans on how to find out what their favorite brother was hiding. However, they would think about it on the way to school because if they didn't hurry, they would be late for class. Chapter 4. "Goodbye, see you later," said a smiling Naruto as he watched his sisters get on the school bus while they all wore coats for the cold since like every year in November the weather was starting to get cold, therefore at any moment it would start to snow, but letting him think about it, Naruto simply watched as the girls returned the farewell with a certain touch of sadness at having to get away from the blonde. However, it was something that could not be avoided and instead they got on so that the driver could start the march to school again. "Bye Naruto, see you tonight." Now it was the turn of an equally warm Rita to say goodbye along with Lily, the youngest of the Loud sisters, and although they normally left her with Naruto in the house this time the blonde mentioned to Rita that today he was going out and that he was not going to be able to take care of her, so it is for that reason that the matriarch of the house was taking the 1-year-old girl. "Bye, take care on the road." Naruto said goodbye in the same way only to see his stepmother drive away in the family van in the direction of work, so Naruto just stood there watching the car drive away from the house until after 2 more blocks it turned off in the direction of the exit of the neighborhood, effectively losing sight of Naruto, who still had his hand raised as a sign of farewell. However, after standing there for 5 more seconds, Naruto finally lowered his hand and then looked at the time on his watch which read 8:58 am. "Well, I think it's time to go," Naruto said, turning around to calmly take a jacket from the side of the main door and then proceed to lock it and without wasting time begin his journey towards his car, so getting in without really rushing, Naruto proceeded to start the old car and then reverse it and begin to walk away from the house. Training, this was where our blonde protagonist was heading. Now you're probably thinking that these workouts are for some sport and well actually your thinking is correct, however judging by how Naruto seemed to be reluctant to hide these workouts from his family, it was something strange after all. In his family, they had Lin who practiced an endless number of different types of sports. However, there was one in particular that the athletic brunette never practiced. This was not because Lin didn't like the sport, no, this was because her stepfather along with Rita had a particular phobia because their little girl would not get involved in said sport and that was what led her sister to not practice that sport. Now Naruto knew that in advance when a few years ago his sister Lin asked mom and dad to put her in a team for that sport. When Naruto heard that question at family dinner, the blonde knew instantly what the answer would be. That's the response that the then little Lin received was a resounding no. Naruto knew this for a reason. He had already asked that long before Lin, and it should be noted that his answer was a little more extensive and abrupt on the part of his stepfather, so after that Naruto did not ask about the matter again and instead, a few months after his stepfather left them, an offer was offered to him. At that moment Naruto didn't really know how to respond to the recruitment offer that had been offered to him. If he accepted, Naruto knew that Rita would be very upset, something that he really didn't want to happen. After all, she was someone he loved much more than his late stepfather. Now it wasn't that he hated the man, no, really his stepfather, instead of treating him like a son, treated him more like the son of a friend, but with Rita, she did treat him quite well when they adopted him. But leaving that thought aside, Naruto at that time didn't know how to really respond to the man who was in front of him handing out flyers while explaining that he was trying to form a team to compete in the regional leagues. At that moment Naruto was about to reject the proposal when a question crossed his mind. What will happen if I accept? Was the question that ran through his mind when another question again overshadowed the previous one. Can I really afford this selfish proposal? Was the other question only for him to answer himself in a dizzying trance? Of course you can afford it, was his self-infused response when without realizing it outside of his thoughts, he was already shaking the man's hand while saying the following words. Of course I would love to be on the team. Present. Naruto had to come out of his thoughts when he realized that he was already arriving at his first stop before going to the training place, so driving a couple more blocks Naruto finally arrived at what was a 1-story house somewhat worn by the passage of time. In itself the house was quite common and did not have much of which would really stand out aesthetically. However, before Naruto could touch the horn of his car, as if it were already a routine for the neighbors of the neighborhood and for Naruto himself, he could hear the screams coming from inside said house. "Woman. Move and bring me a beer." was the guttural cry of a man who could presumably be the patriarch of the house. "Go to hell, you damn mountain of bait. Why don't you get up and do something with your life?" was the response of a woman who could have been the matriarch of the house. "Damn ungrateful bitch, I was the one who brought the food in this house," replied the same guttural voice, while Naruto could only listen with a drop of sweat. "Exactly you were, now you're just a ball of lard with your ass fused to that couch," replied the matriarch of the house, causing more drops of sweat to appear on Naruto's forehead, who was already tired of listening to the insatiable family arguments, so he honked the horn as an indication that he had arrived. This action in itself caused a moment of peace to reign in said house until once again the voice of the patriarch of the house was present. "Woman. Where is your stupid daughter? They're looking for her," the man called, his voice clearly annoyed. "And how would I know where that girl is?" the matriarch responded, however before they could shout at each other again, they finally seemed to find their daughter. "Hey bitch, your fool is looking for you," shouted the man in the house that could be his daughter. "Hey little girl, ask that dude to pay for your food so you don't have one more mouth to feed," was what the matriarch of the house said. At that moment Naruto saw how a somewhat short tan girl of about 1.58 came out of the small house, but do not be fooled by her height and appearance, because she like Naruto was 18 years old, the girl herself was quite thin, and despite the fact that her family seemed to be going through a difficult situation, her thin shape did not seem to be due to lack of food, but rather pure genetics, and well in itself, Naruto could say that she was Hexy. The girl had quite short brown hair almost the same as her sister Luna's, as clothing she wore a sweater with a purple top and a white bottom, she also wore a short-sleeved hood that reached above her navel, on top of this she had a jacket for the cold, and at the bottom, she had some grayish shorts up to the middle of her thighs somewhat tight, while underneath these some tight black tights stick out that reached a little above her ankles. On the girl's face Naruto noticed the almost always plastered smile that didn't seem to want to leave her face. Despite all the things that were said to her inside where she lived, Naruto could actually openly say that he respected the girl for all the things she had to endure with parents like that. However, Naruto came out of his thoughts when he saw the tan girl walk in a happy trot in front of his car, and with irrepressible happiness, he quickly jumped into the passenger seat while proceeding to give the blonde a hug. "Thanks for coming to find me once again, Naruto," the brunette thanked Naruto, who simply smiled back and then stroked her head like a little girl, causing a pout to appear on the brunette's cheeks. "Hey. Stop treating me like a child. We're the same age, remember?" the brunette replied, offended. "Of course I know, Luz," Naruto responded with amusement, and then the now recognized Luz stopped hugging him, allowing Naruto to start the car in the direction of the training place. "Oh right, I almost forgot to tell you, apparently the coach has something important to say to the team," Luz informed her as she left her bag next to her. "Really? Do you have any idea what it's about?" Naruto asked curiously, receiving a refusal from the brunette. "No idea, but he seemed pretty lively, it might be something good," Luz answered calmly as she watched Naruto turn off in the direction of a gas station, with the obvious intention of refueling the vehicle, so parking next to one Naruto quickly proceeded to take out his wallet and then give $10 to Luz, who stared at the money with interest. "Oh, buy energy drinks for both of us," Naruto asked calmly, then got out of the car without waiting for a response from Luz, who could only give a small smile at the small gesture. So, getting out of the car as well, she simply went to the gas station store to buy what she had ordered. To be honest, Luz had known Naruto for at least 2 years and a few months, the conditions in which she met him were quite problematic, so to speak, so immersing herself in her thoughts, Luz proceeded to remember how she met Naruto. Flashback 2 years and 10 months ago. "Okay, just come in and introduce yourself, it's as simple and easy as that," a rather nervous Luz said to herself as she spoke the characteristic Spanish language of a Latina, so letting out one last breath, the nervous Luz proceeded to shakily enter a classroom, causing obviously all the students' attention to focus on her, not helping her nervousness. Can I help you with something?" asked a teacher in charge of the class as he stood up from his desk and approached the nervous mess that was Luz. "Principal, tell me to be in this class," was what the nervous Luz said in a rather crooked and rough English, while she handed a sheet of paper to the teacher, who simply raised an eyebrow to take the sheet of paper and start reading it. While this was happening, the brunette thought it would be a good idea to see those who could be her potential classmates, so looking around her the only thing she saw was the group of students whispering among themselves while they giggled, presumably mocking her. "Did you hear how I speak? I seemed illiterate." She managed to understand a group of girls who looked at her again just to laugh at her. Just by hearing those words, Luz knew that this year at school was going to be difficult, so lowering her eyes in what was an agonizing helplessness, she simply stood there waiting for the teacher to finish reading the sheet he handed her, while enduring the tortuous mockery of her future classmates. However, not wanting to lose hope, she once again raised her gaze and looked around only to be disappointed once again by being greeted with the same sight she had before. However, inspecting the place in more detail, the brunette finally noticed those electrifying eyes that stared at her with pure curiosity and nothing more. Those eyes were quickly accompanied by a head of hair of the brightest shade of blonde she had ever seen in her life. However, as if their eyes were a pair of magnets, the two quickly exchanged glances, and in what seemed like seconds, Luz felt like she was in a self-induced trance, while everyone around her disappeared, and it was just her next to that boy who didn't take his gaze off her brown eyes, transmitting a relaxing tranquility to her. However, every moment of tranquility was destined to end at some point, and this was no exception. Miss Nishida, do you hear me?" asked a teacher's voice, bringing the brunette out of her trance with a gasp as she shook her head, causing the entire classroom to start making fun of her, except for the mustachioed blonde who only had a small smile. "I was telling you that you can sit down, do you understand?" The professor spoke again to an embarrassed Luz who nodded, then looked around again and noticed an empty chair that conveniently was next to the blonde with whom she had shared a moment of clarity a little while ago, so to speak. By the way, the location of where Naruto is one stall before the last one on the right next to the classroom window, so walking in that direction, deeply grateful that the teacher didn't ask her to introduce herself, the brunette simply continued walking while being watched by all her apparent classmates until finally reaching the indicated stall. Once there, she proceeded to sit down and then take off her backpack and turn around with the intention of hanging her bag on the back of the chair. However, Luz stopped what she was going to do when she saw the mischievous and malicious look of a girl who sat behind her, so reconsidering her option, Luz proceeded to sit back somewhat upright and then proceeded to drop her backpack to the floor between her legs. "Okay, let's continue with the class," said the teacher as he went back to sit at his desk. Now for Luz, the first 4 classes were quite uncomfortable and frustrating to say the least, since she could not understand perfectly most of the things that were said by the teachers, therefore this was a quite annoying level of difficulty for the brunette. However, that was not all, since after the first hour of class her classmates seemed to gain a little confidence when it came to mockery, since from one moment to the next, they all began to talk among themselves out loud, while imitating the quite bad way in which she spoke English, so yes, her first day of school was not going very well until now. Recess bell was the loud jingle of the bell indicating the first hour of recess, which caused the teacher to stop in his history explanation of how the first nuclear detonation occurred in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. "Okay guys, you can go out," the teacher gave permission as he took his things and also left the classroom along with the vast majority of the students who were leaving without first making fun of the brunette, who could only sigh in exhaustion at what was happening, but stopping to think about it, Luz for a moment weighed the idea of eating her snack in the classroom. However, she quickly noticed that there were still several gazes on her attentive for any other reason to be able to make fun of her more, so trying to avoid more reasons for her billings to make fun of her, she simply chose to look for a hidden place to eat. However, before she could raise a voice spoke to her. "Hello, Luz, right?" greeted a voice to her right, drawing her attention in that direction, only to see the same blonde she had been in a trance with before. However, she simply stood there paralyzed, not knowing what to really say to him, since she really hadn't had many conversations since she got here, therefore the first thing that came out of her mouth were words in her native language. "Hello, I'm Luz, nice to meet you," greeted the brunette while she realized quite late that the blonde in front of her possibly didn't know how to speak Spanish, so therefore her first chance of making a friend was collapsing before her eyes. However, she simply saw how the blonde took his chin and then tried to speak in a crooked Spanish. "Hello, my name is Naruto. It's also a pleasure to meet you," Naruto finished saying while asking at the end if he had said it correctly, while being seen by a somewhat surprised Luz for noticing that someone was trying to socialize with her. You said it well," Luz replied with a small smile, causing Naruto to smile back, thus starting a conversation in both languages, in which the two corrected each other, with the sole purpose of improving in the other's language, while at the same time forging an unbreakable friendship that over the years became a deeper feeling in the heart of a Luz, who could not find the courage to declare her feelings towards him, for fear of ruining the beautiful friendship they had. "Present. Is that all?" asked a receptionist with a standard smile she gave to all her clients, while now she gave it to a smiling Luz, who was going to nod. However, before she said yes, the voice of a certain blonde she loved in secret appeared. "How about adding some nachos with cheese and ground beef to the order?" Naruto asked calmly while standing behind Luz, who only had to look up to see the sly smile on Naruto's face. "At your service," replied the receptionist with a blush as she withdrew to carry out the order made by the man in front of her. "I thought you just wanted energy drinks," said a confused Luz who continued to stare at the blonde above her. "Did they feed you?" was the only thing Naruto asked as his tone of voice abruptly changed from happy to serious, while Luz understood what the blonde was referring to, so trying to lower her gaze, she was quickly taken by her cheeks, thus preventing her from lowering her face, forcing her to continue looking at a serious Naruto, so letting out a small sigh of defeat, she simply responded with a nod of her head. "Sigh, why am I not surprised?" Naruto said to himself with annoyance, while Luz's face transformed into one of sadness. I'm sorry for making you feed me, the brunette apologized, drawing Naruto's attention, who simply raised an eyebrow. You don't have to apologize, I care about you, besides, you are someone special to me, said Naruto with a smile that made her blush a rather scarlet tone. However, unlike other girls who would remain silent with their blush, Luz let out her somewhat cheeky attitude that characterized her. Am I more special than your sisters? Luz asked with some mockery, while her blush still remained insistent on her cheeks. Hey, don't be too hard, but yes, you could say you're just as special as them, replied an amused Naruto, while Luz's face seemed to be letting out some steam. However, her salvation came in the form of nachos, when the receptionist appeared again next to the nachos and the receipt to try to give it to the blonde who was about to take them. However, the nachos were quickly intercepted by a smiling Luz, who quickly took them along with the receipt. Okay, let's go, Naruto, Luz said, leaving the place while Naruto nodded and left her the $4.50 that the nachos cost, then left the store, only to see a certain brunette carefully inspect the receipt. Is something wrong? Naruto asked curiously, while Luz simply dropped the receipt to the ground before Naruto's attentive gaze, who really didn't give it much importance and simply walked to the side of the paper that contained a phone number, along with some hearts and words that said, "Call me." So getting into the car once more, Naruto once again set off on his way while he felt the heat from the car's heater warm the bodies of both of them. Is the trainer really going to make them train in this cold? Naruto asked curiously as he looked out of the corner of his eye at Luz happily eating the nachos, then swallowed and answered. Apparently he says there's no time to waste and that everyone needs our support as cheerleaders, Luz said as she grabbed a handful of nachos with cheese and then brought them to Naruto's mouth, who simply opened his mouth, letting the brunette put the nachos in it. Seriously, if he knows that we're just a second-rate team, I mean, we won't be able to compete in the regional tournaments, Naruto said calmly, while Luz simply watched the finger that brushed against the blonde's lips, then took a couple of nachos with ground beef and put them in her mouth while discreetly leaving a certain finger in her mouth for a longer time. Well, whatever, you can't argue with that, coach, much, Naruto continued, receiving a nod from a somewhat blushing Luz, who quickly tried to calm her blush. However, Naruto noticed that the brunette seemed to be a little silent, so with some curiosity, he turned his gaze towards her while thinking of a way to bring up a subject. By the way, Luz, it's been a while since you last came to visit the house, why don't you come visit us one of these days? We can watch a movie in the living room. Naruto asked curiously, effectively drawing Luz's attention, who could only raise an eyebrow. Are you sure about that? I mean, you know that apparently your sisters don't like me, said a somewhat depressed Luz while stirring a nacho in the cheese, and she was actually right since the first time she went to visit the blonde's house. Well, let's just say that after about 10 seconds of being introduced to his sisters, they quickly seemed to take a hostile and cutting attitude towards her. No matter how much she wanted to socialize with them, she was always repelled in a rather sharp and dry way. So after a few more visits, hoping to be able to move forward in her relationship with them, she finally decided to stop trying after knowing the reason why Naruto's sisters avoided her. Oh come on, I'm going to talk seriously with them, you know they must be in a phase of their youth, so don't worry. Besides, I hadn't told you before, you are possibly the only person outside of my family that I consider equally important, Naruto finished saying while running a hand through the short hair of the brunette, who simply nodded with a smile. Ahaha. What kind of phase is that? I've never seen it in my life, mocked an amused Luz, recovering her spirits with the blonde's words. Hey, there are many types of phases in life, Naruto replied with an equally funny mockery. 12 minutes later. Ugh, we finally arrived, was what was said by a smiling Luz, while being followed by a Naruto, who also got out of the car that was parked between two other cars in a parking lot in front of a small stadium that was presumably next to a university to which he belonged. Well, what are we waiting for? Naruto asked as steam came out of his mouth every time he spoke. Wait, you have a little bit of cheese on your lips, Luz said as she proceeded to run her thumb over said cheese stain to remove it and then, without thinking, put said bit of cheese in her mouth. Oh? Was the cheese good? Naruto asked with a flirtatious smile as he looked at a confused Luz who didn't understand the strangeness of the situation. However, after 3 seconds she simply blushed and again didn't let herself be teased. Or if it was pretty good, Luz responded cheekily, to which Naruto simply laughed and then opened the trunk of the car and took out a rather large bag while he closed the trunk again. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Naruto responded equally shamelessly as he began walking alongside a smiling brunette in the direction of the stadium. Once inside the stadium's waiting area, the two simply continued walking through a few more corridors until they finally reached two divided entrances, while signs indicated that they were the locker rooms of the place. Well, see you on the court, Naruto said to the brunette, who nodded with a smile as she entered the women's locker room and the men's locker room in Naruto's case. Meanwhile at school. Do you think more new clothes have arrived to the warehouses? was the question of a girl with brown hair tied in a ponytail to her shoulders while on her face she had a somewhat animated smile. The girl was wearing a purple blouse with a black miniskirt, her age was around 17 years old. As her smile reflected, she was a regularly animated girl, and well, although her body was slightly above the standard of the other high school girls, you could still see some good curves here and there that highlighted her discreet beauty, a true delicacy for those who knew how to appreciate her beauty. This question was asked while she seemed to be watching a video on her cell phone. I hope so, Dana. I'm tired of seeing the same clothes in stores. Oh my god, how stressful, another girl replied, recognizing the previous one as Dana. Now the girl who had just spoken also appeared to be 17 years old, and unlike the previous one, her hair color was the same shade of blonde as a certain older loud sister. Her hair fell to her back, and on top of it, she had a light blue headband, while she wore a shirt of the same shade of light blue, along with a brown plaid miniskirt. Her face had a somewhat conceited look along with a relaxed smile. The blonde actually had a fairly well-defined body, even though her clothes were not revealing, and well, it should be noted that this girl along with Lori were considered the most beautiful in school. It should be noted that at the time she spoke she was browsing Instagram. Of course you're going to get tired of seeing the same clothes if you spend your time in the store every day. God Carol, how can you be there every day? Was what a relaxed Lori said, who was also engrossed in her cell phone. Honestly, you would rarely see this trio of girls without using their cell phones. Anyway, what time did you say we would meet at the mall? Asked Carol, not giving much importance to what her blonde, feigning rival in beauty, had said before. Well, I told my brother to take me at 3:30, so you can be sure that at that, Lori was saying, only to be abruptly interrupted by a smiling Dana. Wow. Stop the car there for a moment, is your brother going? Asked the brunette with more interest than she intended, thus attracting Lori's attention, who simply frowned a little at Dana's sudden interest. Yes, why? Any problem? Asked a somewhat annoyed Lori, however the one who answered this time was her blonde counterpart. Not at all, I guess I'll put on my best clothes, Carol replied, further annoying Lori, who already saw this reaction coming from her friends. After all, it was no secret that the two of them were after Naruto, since they saw him 10 months ago when he went to a parents' meeting that Rita couldn't attend, so since Naruto was already of legal age at that time, he was the one who attended. So you're going all out, huh, Carol, said a smiling Dana, only for her smile to quickly turn into one of defiance. Don't think I'm going to be left behind, the brunette challenged, only for Carol's smug look to turn into an equally challenging one. We'll see about that, Carol challenged as lightning bolts collided between them. All of this was observed by an annoyed Loria, whose forehead was starting to show a vein as a result of her annoyance. Jump, as if Naruto would pay attention to easy girls like them, the annoyed Lori said to herself as she looked away from the two only for something to catch her attention, effectively inhibiting the blonde's anger, who simply stared at the video that was currently playing on Dana's cell phone, which was lazily lying on the table they were sitting at. For a moment Lori simply stood there watching the video of a blonde guy playing some apparently horror game while wearing a black mask along with orange glasses. However, she could not see well the background of the room in which the apparent YouTuber was because his image was minimized. However, a sensation that she had previously felt returned with the same intensity as before. That sensation of having seen that place somewhere again ran through her being, so calmly Lori proceeded to ask. Hey Dana, who's that YouTuber? Lori asked the brunette, who stopped staring at her other blonde friend with a raised eyebrow. Huh? I didn't know you liked watching these types of YouTubers, said a curious Dana, since it was true that Lori really didn't like watching YouTubers playing games, although apart from playing he also did other things like composing various types of music, although of course his strong point was electronic music. Yeah, well, I've been interested lately, you know, just for a change from time to time, Lori lied, hoping Dana would fall for her. However, the brunette simply shrugged and proceeded to tell her the name of the YouTuber. After all, it didn't cost her anything to tell her. His name is Speedy Fox. Dana finally responded to Lori, who was about to search for the YouTuber. However, before she could even enter the application, the bell rang, calling everyone's attention, indicating that recess time was over. Well, I guess I'll look for it later, Lori said to herself as she wrote the name down on her notepad. Chapter 5. Walking down a somewhat dark hallway was a quiet Naruto being illuminated only by the dim sunlight that was currently being overshadowed by the dark clouds scattered across the sky. Once the blonde finished walking down the hallway, it was now noticeable that he was wearing a distinctive orange training shirt that was slightly bulging due to the body protectors that were underneath it. In his right hand, he held a kind of black helmet with some orange C-shaped detail. He held some iron bars along with some kind of dark glasses underneath it, where the eyes of the one who would wear the helmet should be. Naruto simply stood there looking at the area around him, only for a few seconds later a snowflake to descend in front of his eyes, causing our blonde protagonist to look up, noticing that more and more snowflakes were descending on the stadium and possibly the entire region. So it started snowing, Naruto said to himself as he calmly put on his helmet, only to feel an extra weight fall on his shoulders. Naruto's here. Said a cheerful Luz as she hugged Naruto's neck, who simply nodded amusedly, then grabbed the breed's hands tightly and quickly began spinning on her ankles, making the brunette giggle with amusement. However, after a couple of seconds, Naruto finally stopped spinning and let a dizzy light peel off from him. I hope you're not going to throw up the nachos I bought you, because I'd have to buy you some more, Naruto said in a funny voice, only to see Luz take out her cell phone while saying. Surprise photo. Said the brunette only to see Naruto strike the fastest pose that came to mind. Once the photo was taken, Luz proceeded to search her gallery for the photo, hoping that the blonde had appeared in a strange pose, only to make a cutely annoyed face. How do you always make sure your photos come out well? Luz asked Naruto, who gave her a foxy smile. What can I say, I can't control my level of tastiness, Naruto replied, causing the brunette to arch into uncontrolled laughter. However, the good atmosphere that existed between the two was interrupted by a voice that called both of their attention to what was a group of 3 guys who had the same uniform as the blonde. Well, but look who decided to show up at the practices, was the voice that Naruto heard, and he could only frown at what was about to happen. The guy who spoke seemed to be the leader of the group, who was around 1.82 meters tall and had a rather robust build. And here we go again, Naruto said to himself as he turned around in the direction of the group who wanted to look intimidating. I really didn't expect to witness your disgusting presence again. It was enough with the smell of poverty that your dog exudes, the guy was going to say. However, before he could finish that word, Naruto quickly grabbed him by the bars of his helmet and then pulled him until he was in front of his face. You better not refer to her like that again, because if you do, I swear I don't care what the coach says, because I'm going to knock all your teeth out of that disgusting and rotten mouth of yours, Naruto warned with a rather aggressive and annoyed voice, making the guy who didn't want to be left behind break out in a cold sweat and then hit his hooves with a resonant sound that Naruto didn't mind. Naruto, it's okay, don't pay attention to him, whispered a worried Luz. However, if her words reached the blonde's ears, he didn't show it, since he didn't retreat even a step from the skirmish that was taking place. Are you and how many more are going to force me? The guy asked with a slight touch of arrogance. However, Naruto only had to exert a fairly powerful amount of force on his hand, causing some clicks to resonate from the guy's helmet, making him very nervous. I don't need anyone else to break your face, Dylan, Naruto responded to the now recognized as Dylan, who had now placed his hands on the blonde's shoulder while trying to uselessly move the blonde away from him, thus giving an example of the enormous strength that Naruto had. However, before things got worse, a man's voice caught the group's attention. You better relax or I'll have to punish you both, was what was said by a serious-looking man with some wrinkles on his face, indicating that the man was probably around 45 years old. The man was bald, there was no better way to say it. As for his attitude, he seemed to have a curious obsession with speaking to everyone in a militaristic way, and well, he was someone who was easy to annoy. Now the next thing the blonde would say was personal, but the coach seemed to have it out for him alone, just like most of the team. Naruto didn't know why everyone seemed to have some kind of problem with him, just like Luz. Well, actually, Naruto had a pretty clear idea of why that almost obsessive aberration towards them, and that was for the simple reason that he and Luz were poor. Well, in Luz's case, she was unfortunately poor, and in Naruto's case, well, they barely had enough to support themselves. Now you'll ask yourself, what does that have to do with anything? Well, it has to do with all the other members of the team, since they all came from families with enough money to consider themselves of a fairly good status. After all, the multiple protective accessories needed to play this game were quite expensive. Now the question would be, and how was Naruto able to buy his? Well, easy, my dear reader, Naruto got them secondhand. And although in Luz's case she didn't have to buy many things, unlike the pom-poms and the cheerleader uniform, her situation was still no better than Naruto's, since like the other cheerleaders were also from wealthy families who were only there with the sole objective of taking photos for social networks and getting a good match with one of the wealthy boys. DSK, Naruto snapped, letting go of the idiot Dylan, who took 2 steps back while killing the blonde slightly shorter than him. Remember that Naruto is 1.78 meters tall. Let's go, we'll start training, said the trainer, while the strongman in front of Naruto just snorted, then turned around and left with his 2 lackeys. Come on, Naruto, and you don't have to pay attention to them, said a stuttering Luz to the blonde while gently taking him by the arm, causing this action to obviously catch his attention, so turning his gaze in the direction of the brunette. Naruto had to soften his gaze when he noticed that Luz was a trembling mess due to the cold, along with the uniform she was wearing at the moment. Sigh, it's okay, I've calmed down now. By the way, you should put on a coat at least, said Naruto, watching as the brunette hugged herself in search of warmth. I can't, the others told me that the coach said we couldn't wear coats, Luz responded to a blonde who noticed how the other cheerleaders were coming out of another of the entrances a little further away wearing coats. Honestly, everyone here was already too grown up to be playing this kind of jokes on the others. Was the only thing Naruto said to the brunette, who nodded as she followed Naruto to a pile of bags stacked next to the benches, so looking for her bag that was particularly far from the others she began to search inside it. I guess you left your backpack in the locker room, Naruto guessed, since when she left she didn't have her bag with her. No, Luz replied, only to see Naruto take out another spare coat and proceed to hand it to her. Use this for a while, Naruto offered calmly to Luz, who didn't know whether to take it or not. But the others said Luz was going to say, only to be interrupted by Naruto. That was a lie. Look at them laughing there, enjoying the suffering of others, Naruto pointed out with annoyance towards the other cheerleaders who were making fun of his friend. Come on Luz, don't let yourself be intimidated anymore, don't pay attention to anything those morons say, and show them that you're better than them, Naruto encouraged, while he put the coat on the brunette, who could only feel how warm it was, and well, the coat was too big for her. Fine, but promise me that you'll be watching me, asked a cheerful Luz, receiving a smile in return. Sure, Naruto replied, then turned their backs to each other and each went to their respective training groups. Time jump 1 hour and 48 minutes later. Run faster Naruto, was the shout of a very pissed off coach as he watched possibly the fastest player on the team. However, throughout the entire practice a single pass could never be completed, and no, it wasn't because Naruto didn't know how to catch a football. No, the reason was the damn quarterback's fault, who always threw the ball too far forward for Naruto to reach, and yes, this was being done on purpose. However, the good-for-nothing coach didn't seem to notice and simply directed all his anger towards the blonde. Note: quarterback is the player who receives the ball at the start of a play to throw it to any other player on the field. And it was for this reason that right now the angry trainer was approaching an agitated Naruto, who could only feel the trainer's rough grip on the irons of his helmet and then forcing him to look down at his angry and wrinkled face. Naruto, do you want to explain to me what the hell is going on? The angry trainer asked the tired Naruto, who only looked at him for a few moments before proceeding to answer. The quarterback throws the hair. Naruto was going to complain, however the coach didn't let him finish. Don't even think about blaming the quarterback, he's the best we have on the team, the coach warned, rage burning in his eyes. But such horrible passes, it's no wonder we haven't won a single tournament, Naruto whispered angrily. What did you just say? The coach asked, only to receive the most curt response he'd ever heard. Nothing, Naruto replied, his annoyance about to explode if this bald old man didn't let go of his helmet. This imperceptible message seemed to have been received, since not even 3 seconds later he loosened his grip and let Naruto go. HMP, go take a break and I hope you show me why the hell I'm still keeping you on the team, the coach ordered as he turned around and returned to his previous position. Because I'm the most valuable special player on this team, Naruto replied, his annoyance slowly subsiding. Explanation time. Well, American football is made up of 53 players. These players are divided into 3 groups. 11 players play as the offense. These players enter the field when obviously the team has the ball, and their objective is to make the team advance the greatest number of yards in a 100-yard field until reaching the end zone, which is called touchdown, which would be equivalent to 6 points. However, if they fail to reach the end zone, a referee will be in charge of signaling the yard where it was stopped. After that, the team again starts the play 10 yards behind where the ball was left. This is where the team has 4 opportunities to surpass that point. If they manage to pass the point, the team will keep their 4 opportunities. However, if they do not manage to pass it, 1 opportunity will be deducted. Now if the team does not manage to pass the point in their 4 opportunities, then the ball goes directly to the opposing team. Once a touchdown is made, the team has the opportunity to make an extra point either through a kick between the space of the 2 U-shaped bars at the end of the court, which would be equivalent to 1 more point, or they can throw the ball to another player to enter the end zone, which would be equivalent to 2 points. The offense is in charge of all this movement. Now the defense, as its name suggests, is in charge of preventing at all costs the opposing team from crossing the down line, whether by interrupting a pass, intercepting a pass, tackling the quarterback, tackling a receiver or stopping a runner, this with the sole purpose of preventing them from passing the point where the ball was stopped on the previous play. Finally, there are the remaining 31 players. These players are called special players, either to make specific plays or on rare occasions as players who can be, so to speak, more versatile in what we talk about positionalism and plays. To be more specific, these players can be positioned in the defensive line as well as in the offensive, either by their great technique to not drop a ball, by their great physical condition, by their incredible technique in knocking down the opponent, or by the ease of sneaking between opposing players without being stopped, and Naruto was one of these rare players. End of explanation. Note: this was a brief explanation of how American football is played, or at least most of the things that are throughout the story. Some points that were not explained will be added. Present. Those pieces of crap, when are they going to mature? said Naruto, who simply let himself fall on the benches while taking off his helmet and watched as the assholes who were supposed to be his partner seemed to be making fun of him, while the apparent provoker of the idea of screwing him was none other than the retarded strongman who answered to the name of Dylan. However, there was no point in continuing to bother himself about it. So instead of immersing himself in anger, Naruto simply searched his backpack for one of the energy drinks he had bought previously and then began to drink it calmly. However, after a couple of drinks, her gaze was quickly drawn to the group of cheerleaders, in which she quickly noticed the particular way of cheering of a certain brunette while giving acrobatic turns showing off her great agile abilities. So calmly observing the spectacle, Luz seemed to finish her demonstration after a back turn while spinning on her axis, ending up standing while raising her arms. However, almost the instant she finished her demonstration, she seemed to notice the particular gaze of that special person for her, so turning her gaze in the direction of the blonde, she simply smiled at him while giving her a slight greeting, which Naruto returned calmly. "Okay guys, let's do the last round, Brady, they're going to pass it to you, Dylan, you're going to make the pass, and let's see," was the coach's voice that caught Naruto's attention, and Luz saw Naruto look away in that direction. However, she quickly looked back at Naruto, who was standing up, while he also looked at her again and signaled her to observe what was going to happen in this last round. The other cheerleaders seemed to have noticed this, since not long after they all stopped what they were doing to see what was going to happen. "Coach. I'm going to intercept him," said Naruto, drawing the attention of the coach, who could only see him with a raised eyebrow as he watched him put on his helmet. So after watching for a few moments, he saw no problem in giving one last chance to the blonde, who seemed like a failure on the team. "Okay, get in position," and when the signal is given, the coach was going to say, only to be interrupted by Naruto. "Yes, I know how this works," said the blonde, while his eyes didn't leave the guy named Brady. After all, because of his unreachable passes he got scolded, so let's say that Naruto would take out a little on the ass face. So trotting to his position, Naruto was observed by everyone present, while some thought that he couldn't really do much and others, well, the others were just waiting to see what would happen, as was the case of Luz, along with the other cheerleaders who saw how Naruto signaled Luz to make a recording, which the brunette did not hesitate to do. "That everything is ready and it begins," was what the coach said, while, like a fluid session of movements thanks to hundreds of practices, the ball was passed from between the legs of the first player, thus giving the start, while at the foe you could already notice a Naruto starting to move. Once the ball reached Dylan's hands, he quickly spotted his teammate Brady, who was already running, so he threw the ball ahead of him, where he assumed his teammate would be. Everyone just kept watching as the ball traveled through the air towards the hands of the smiling Brady. However, not a second after the ball touched his fingertips, like a switch, the air was expelled from his lungs at great speed, and when there was nothing else to get out, vomit followed and splattered the grass, while each and every one of the observers watched in horrified disbelief as a calm Naruto strongly slammed his shoulder into Brady's ribcage, stopping him in his tracks, while he could only fall to the grass, while the lights in his brain went out and he let himself sink into unconsciousness. "Ugh," was the group groan that everyone let out in unison the moment the sound of impact was heard, while some looked away due to the phantom pain they felt when they imagined that for some reason they could have been Brady at that moment. "Shit," was what the coach said as he watched with the others as Naruto approached the unconscious Brady's body and then placed 2 fingers on his jugular for 3 seconds. He then looked in everyone's direction and said, "Calm down. He's just unconscious," said a calm Naruto as he sniffed the air a little more, only to wrinkle his nose in disgust. Coach. I think Brady's going to need a bath after this," Naruto said again while he walked away from the guy who clearly smelled like shit, receiving a nod from the coach, who sent 2 other players from the team to take Brady away. "Hey Luz. Did you record it?" Naruto asked a silent Luz, who came out of her surprise to then give him a smile along with a thumbs up as an indication that she did record it. "Let me see it," Naruto asked, while Luz nodded, then looked for the video and watched Naruto again. "Do you want to see it normal or in slow motion?" asked an amused Luz as she watched Naruto place a finger on the chin of his helmet. "I don't know what you're saying," Naruto asked Luz, who just looked at him amusedly and then said in unison, "In slow motion," they said, so Luz could change the video settings, and with anxious looks they began to watch the video. It is worth noting that the others in the cheerleading group also came closer to see the blonde's discovery. "This would definitely go viral if it was posted on social media," was what Luz said as she turned to look at Naruto, who could only nod at what she said. "I would definitely do it," said a thoughtful Naruto as the idea crossed his mind. In reality, there didn't seem to be a big problem in letting Luz upload the video. After all, the shirt she was wearing was a training one, so her name wasn't written on it. His face was also covered, so it was difficult for someone who knew him to realize that the guy in the video was him. Besides, the only one who had the potential to see this video could be Lin, and she wasn't much into using social networks. Another could be Lori, but again Lori wasn't into seeing things like that, so there was no risk at all. So giving Luz a mischievous smile, she quickly understood Naruto's intentions, so returning the mischievous smile she proceeded to enter her social media accounts and proceeded to upload the video. 18 minutes later. Off coffee. Well, apparently Brady is still unconscious, so I'm going to give you the news of why I planned this impromptu training, said a strangely calm coach as he saw all the players and cheerleaders present grouped in front of him, listening to him in deathly silence. Well, as many of you know, the Christmas tournament is just around the corner and we've been training hard to win this tournament, but don't worry, this isn't the real news, the coach informed the group who remained expectant. The real news is that a university team from Japan is going to come and face the winner of the tournament. Do you know what that means? The coach informed and asked, receiving confused looks from those present, except for Naruto, who proceeded to answer. That means that since it's apparently an important game, there's a chance that there will be talent scouts who come to watch the game, Naruto responded calmly, causing the coach to snap his fingers in affirmation. Exactly. This is a unique opportunity to finally put the team on the map and be able to participate in more important tournaments, said an euphoric coach, while Naruto could only raise an eyebrow, because although the presence of a talent scout could increase that possibility, that really wasn't what he was destined to do. His true motive, as his name says, is to hunt down talented players, not talented teams, but well, Naruto wouldn't bother arguing with him. So he simply listened to the man's motivational speech so he could leave. 26 minutes later. Finally, I thought it would never end, was what a tired Naruto said as he let himself fall into the driver's seat of his car. Same here, I wouldn't shut up, said an equally tired Luz, who also slumped into the passenger seat as she watched Naruto turn on the car, which quickly turned on the heater, causing the two to melt in their seats. How did you get the car heater to work? Luz asked curiously, since the car itself seemed like it would stop working at any moment. Oh well, you know, after spending a week next to my cell phone watching videos on YouTube, I finally got it to work, Naruto responded relaxed, letting a silence take over inside the car, only to be overshadowed a few seconds later by Luz's laughter. Seriously? I don't believe it, said the brunette, not really believing that Naruto fixed a car's air conditioning system just by watching videos. Well, you'll have to believe it because that's how I managed to make it work, Naruto replied as a small smile appeared on his face. You know that to be a mechanic you have to take a course and you didn't care and did the job of a mechanic without any course hours, said a funny Luz. Yeah, well, what can I say, was the only thing the blonde said as he looked at his watch that read 12:49. So looks like it's time to go. I'm going to take Lori to the mall, Naruto informed calmly as he reversed out of the parking lot to head off to drop his friend off at her respective home. Oh, that's good, was what Luz said while she remembered the blonde sisters, and she couldn't avoid the reason why she didn't seem to be welcome at the house. That's right, apart from keeping her feelings for him a secret, she also had another secret, or rather knew a secret that she hadn't told the blonde about his sisters, and that was it. Yes, that same secret. Luz knew that the blonde sisters had that spark that she herself had when she saw her secret crush, therefore it wasn't difficult to know that they also had feelings for him. However, there was a slight problem: they were his sisters, or well, his stepsisters. Actually, the day she found out about the secret, the idea didn't hit her that hard. What she assumed was the fact that she already knew that they weren't blood siblings. Now the fact that step-siblings entered into a relationship didn't seem like there was a real problem after all. They had no blood similarities, therefore they were just blood sisters living with a man outside the family. However, for society there were still a large number who would see this as something in bad taste, but well, in reality Luz didn't care that much, since when she lived in her native country, she had heard stories where relatives fornicated with each other. That's right, living in Latin America could be a very peculiar experience, so the idea that there was the possibility that Naruto could sleep with one of her stepsisters didn't bother her at all. But well, coming out of her deep thoughts, Luz noticed that they were actually already arriving at her house, so looking to her side, she noticed that Naruto was only dedicated to driving, apparently noticing that she wanted to have a moment with her thoughts. Really, Naruto was quite perceptive. This made her wonder if he already knew about his sister's feelings or her own feelings. Well, we arrived, said Naruto as he stopped in front of the chestnut's home, who only gave him a bitter look at the place where he lived. However, that look didn't last long on his face, being replaced by one of tranquility. Well, see you later, take care, Luz said goodbye as she began to take off Naruto's coat, only to be stopped by him, who placed his hand on hers. Don't worry about him, you can give it back to me whenever you want, Naruto offered calmly, while Luz nodded with an imperceptible blush as she put her coat back on and then got out of the car and gave a last goodbye, only to see Naruto walk away from home. Sigh, another day in which I couldn't muster the courage to tell her my feelings, a sad Luz said to herself, as she could already hear her parents' screams echoing in the empty street while snow fell lazily around them, and without further ado, the brunette simply turned around to enter her grey life. Meanwhile with Naruto he was driving calmly through the streets heading home to take a break of at least 1 hour and a half to accompany Lori to the mall with her friends. Now although Lori only mentioned that she wanted him to take her. Her intentions clearly said that the blonde wanted him to accompany her and well he loved his sisters very much so he couldn't deny her spending more time with her, therefore that was precisely what he was going to do, and this is where Luz's doubt re-enters the readers' heads. Does Naruto know that great amount of feelings that surround him? 13 minutes later. Leaving the car in the garage, a calm Naruto proceeded to get out of it while noticing that Rita obviously hadn't arrived home yet and it wasn't a surprise after all she arrived home around 5 in the afternoon and well her sisters arrived around 2:40 so he still had about an hour and a few minutes to rest. So entering the house Naruto went up the stairs and then turned right and walked quickly to his room and then let himself fall heavily on the bed, but not before setting an alarm on his cell phone, programmed to wake him up in an hour and 20 minutes, so with nothing else to do he let sleep claim him once more, while he absent-mindedly covered himself because of the cold. Chapter 6. It was 2:28 in the afternoon and a certain blonde protagonist was still happily sleeping, completely ignoring the voices downstairs, indicating the early arrival of his sisters, and once again like all the previous times a big commotion came accompanying them. However unlike previous times one of them specifically the oldest did not bother to discuss the possibility of using the first bathroom and instead the silent Lori slipped away as quietly as she could in the direction of her favorite blonde's room. Once she reached the door, the older blonde sister expertly entered the room like a blur, without even emitting a hint of suspicion for the others who were still fighting among themselves. Her motive for entering the blonde's room? Well, Lori wanted to make sure that Naruto could take her to the mall or well Lori was just looking for a valid excuse to be able to enter said room, just to spend a few minutes alone with Naruto. So once the door to the room was closed with her inside, Lori slowly turned her gaze towards her back while holding back a sigh of relief for having achieved her goal. However her sight quickly focused on the person causing those butterflies in her stomach who was still asleep without seeming affected by the noise outside, although now that Lori noticed it, the sound had faded quite a bit, leaving the noise she had heard before as a simple passing whisper. Not giving it much importance for the moment, Lori quickly tensed when the ball of sunlight that illuminated her life moved between the bedspreads while they seemed to open a little, revealing Naruto's torso, almost as if the bed itself was welcoming him to join the sleeping blonde. Note. I don't know if this word changes in other countries, but in my country the thick sheet for the cold is called kolcha. Almost hypnotized by knowing how it would feel to sleep with the blonde after so much time, Lori slowly walked until she was in front of the bed, which was only 3 simple steps. Now all that was left was the most difficult part, getting into bed. As the idea crossed her mind, she couldn't help but wonder if the blonde would realize that someone was getting into bed without even realizing that her body was already taking a corner of the quilt, and carefully, she slowly got in without raising suspicions from the blonde who continued sleeping. By the time her thoughts ended with the decision not to get into bed, it was too late because when Lori returned to the present, she was already lying next to the blonde while being equally covered by the quilt. When? Lori mentally wondered, however Naruto's movement made any movement she was planning to make stop in its tracks, and instead she stood there stiffer than death while she let the blonde hug her, as if she were a warm pillow resting her head on those two rather elastic and soft mounds, not to mention the slight throbbing that could be heard as it seemed to start to accelerate more and more quickly, turning into a rhythmic throbbing. By this point Lori's face was a complete mess, trying to reflect the feelings that flooded her body like a torrential tsunami, however trying to relax as much as she could in the end, the oldest blonde of the loud sisters simply decided to enjoy the moment and as gently as she could, she hugged Naruto's head closer against her chest, thus sharing the body heat of the two, while she slowly let herself fall into a sleep that probably wouldn't last long, considering that her sisters were in the house. And wouldn't last long for one of them to think of entering the room too. 10 minutes later. There were already 2 minutes left until the alarm set on Naruto's cell phone went off, however there was something that Naruto didn't like very much to happen, something that surely many people have experienced at least a handful of times in their daily lives, and what was that? Well, that was the annoying ability to wake up a few minutes before the alarm went off, and why he didn't like it, well, it was obvious since once you woke up and noticed that there were only 2 minutes left until the alarm went off, it was capable of making anyone's life miserable after all, it was 2 minutes in which you could have rested more. But well, that was what was happening to the sleepy Naruto who, due to the short nap he took, his body was a bit too sleepy to even feel that his own leg was crossed between 2 other legs that obviously weren't his, or that he was hugging a pillow from the waist that was too warm and condensed to even feel like a pillow, and finally he was too sleepy to realize that his face was being buried between the 2 softest and warmest things he could feel. And for a moment the blonde considered the idea of simply going back to sleep. However, this scene was something that was unfortunately destined to end, so after a few agonizing seconds, the silent room, as if it were the thunderous sound of thunder, the door of the room slammed open, revealing a smiling Lin who was carrying a soccer ball in her hand, causing the inevitable awakening of the two blondes, who could only open their eyes in startle. "Naruto. Let's play soccer," the brunette was saying, only for her animated proposal to lower in intensity when she saw the scene in front of her of Naruto and Lori lying in the same bed. Well, they got up stunned without knowing what was happening. However, the small scandal that Lin made along with the fact that Naruto's name had been mentioned was enough for the other members of the house to go see what was happening, only to come across the same scene. "What's the scandal?" asked a curious Luna without really remembering that 10 minutes before they were the ones making a scandal. However, the rock fanatic who appeared on the scene also remained silent upon seeing the scene. Followed by her, the other remaining sisters appeared asking equally about the scandal, and as you can imagine, the same thing happened as the previous two. Leaving once again the room in a rather tense silence, only overshadowed by the alarm that felt it was a good time to go off. "Huh? What happened?" Naruto asked sleepily, still not noticing that he was still hugging what he thought was his pillow. However, after 8 seconds without receiving an answer, his sight, along with his other senses, quickly returned with force. "Oh, hello girls, how are you?" Naruto greeted calmly to his sisters, who were still watching the scene in amazement. However, before any of them could get over their surprise, the blonde quickly noticed that what he was hugging was not a pillow, and instead it was a red Lori who seemed to be calm. However, inside the poor loud was a silent mess. "Lori, is it already late?" was the first thing Naruto asked without really giving it much thought as to why she was sleeping with him, since that was the first thing he realized, but once again Naruto didn't mind. No, we still have time," Lori replied as she felt Naruto remove his hands from her waist. Thank goodness. Well, I guess you're ready now," asked Naruto, receiving a negative from Lori. Well, now she felt how the leg that had previously been between hers was withdrawn, and then the blonde passed his body over hers before the expectant gaze of everyone. "Naruto," Lori called the blonde, who turned to look at her with curiosity. "Yeah? What's wrong?" Naruto asked calmly as he stretched his limbs and circulations. "Aren't you upset that I sneaked into your bed without permission?" the older sister asked, causing the murderous glare her other sisters were directing at her to quickly turn to one of curiosity as they turned their gaze to the blonde, who stopped stretching and turned to look at her. "Not really, you're welcome whenever you like, although it would be appreciated if you let them know, otherwise I guess it's no problem," Naruto replied without mentioning that it was forbidden to use his computer, since if he told them about that prohibition, Naruto knew that curiosity would quickly invade them, so for the moment he would leave it like that. He would hope that the password he had along with the many other security settings would be enough to keep his secret safe. So walking in the direction of the bathroom, Naruto prepared to leave the room, only to be called by a smiling Lini. "Naruto, can I sleep with you tonight?" asked the always cheerful Lini. However, the way she asked it seemed more like an affirmation than a question. However, Naruto simply gave her a smile along with a nod, thus triggering the other sisters present to once again start a scandal of affirmative questions that they were going to sleep with the blonde. "Girls, I don't think we'll all fit in my bed," Naruto commented with a noticeable drop of sweat running down his forehead. However, what the blonde said was quickly ignored by them, who simply continued arguing over who could sleep with him first. So, leaving them alone for the moment, hoping that their anger wouldn't focus on him, Naruto simply proceeded to stealthily leave his room to do his job. The discussion actually lasted about 3 minutes, in which everyone seemed to reach an agreement. Well, everyone, except for a quiet Lori who didn't participate in the debate of the others who were now looking at her with daggers. "And you don't think you're going to escape from this, you damn rascal," was what an annoyed Lisa said to the quiet Lori, who slowly began to get up from the bed, only to walk among her sisters, apparently not caring about the threat of the most intelligent of the family. "Do what you want, I'm going to enlist," was the older blonde's whispered response to her sisters, who just looked at her in confusion. "What's wrong with her now? Is she trying to do reverse psychology?" asked a confused Luin, who could only watch with the others as Lori entered her shared room with Lini, leaving a small trance of silence in the hallway. "Well, what do we do now?" asked Lucy's monotonous voice, scaring everyone with her sudden appearance. Meanwhile, inside the room with Lori, she was leaning against the door while her gaze remained lowered, causing a small shadow that covered her eyes. Then she inhaled with apparent tranquility, only for her to suddenly look up while she grabbed both cheeks, thus revealing a rather blushed face, along with a touch of longing in her eyes. And now what am I going to do to be able to see his face?" asked the older loud, who couldn't control her blush. Change of scene. In a fairly large house and with the appearance of what seemed to be a fairly wealthy family, judging by the finely detailed statues and the occasional passing of some users or employees who kept the large garden in good condition. Well, this was a mansion of a wealthy family. But well, now is not the time to appreciate the sculptural statues and other details of the mansion, and instead, we are going to focus on two teenage figures who seem to be fervently discussing some specific matter that obviously we will not know if we do not get into context. Okay, can you tell me again why I have to go with you to the mall? You know I have more important things to do, was said by a somewhat annoyed blonde who looked about 16 years old. On her hair she had a pale pink headband, while her hair fell to her lower back, and she was wearing a white shirt while over it, she had a green coat with diamond details around the chest area. To complete the outfit on her bottom half she was wearing a black miniskirt, along with some thin-looking shoes with white stockings a little above her ankles. I don't know, Kendall, asked Mom, who was the one who proposed the idea in the first place, replied an annoyed Carol, having to endure the complaints of her little sister, now recognized as Kendall, who simply crossed her arms as a sign of annoyance since she had to accompany Carol against her will, so letting out a sigh, the younger blonde proceeded to ask her sister another question in the hopes of making the outing more interesting and bearable. So who is this Naruto guy you're so interested in? Kendall asked with false interest, since when her mother sent her to tell Carol that she had to accompany her, she could hear Carol singing an obviously made-up song where she did graphically hexual things with a Naruto guy. Now if the question surprised her older sister, she didn't show it and instead seemed to cheer up, judging by her sleepy and love-filled face that if it weren't for the fact that this wasn't a cartoon, Kendall would swear that at any moment Carol would emit a pink glow with butterflies and hearts. Ooh, dear little sister, what I feel for Naruto isn't just interest, this is more than that. After all, I love him," replied a cheerful Carol, making Kendall sweat a drop of sweat. Kendall didn't really know how to react to what his sister had said. After all, she had never been interested in anyone, and well, if someone dared to ask her to be her boyfriend, she would be rejected with the greatest humiliation she could muster. Carol certainly had a very sharp tongue, however, coming out of her thoughts, Kendall noticed something really strange that had never happened since she could remember. Where's our driver?" Kendall asked strangely. After all, Mateo, the driver who was in charge of taking them where they wanted, wasn't waiting for him as he usually did. Don't worry, I told him not to take us today," Carol responded to Kendall's doubt, who simply looked at her in pure confusion. "And why would you do that exactly?" was the question from a confused Kendall. "Oh well, Naruto isn't wealthy, so that he doesn't feel self-conscious about my socioeconomic status, we're going to take the bus," Carol explained to her younger sister, who had an indescribable expression on her face, which was accompanied by the following words. Wait, are you telling me that you of all people are trying to be humble?" The now very confused Kendall finished asking, only receiving a nod from Carol. "In a nutshell, yes, you could say yes," Carol replied calmly as she continued walking to the exit of her home's grounds, causing Kendall to snap out of her daze and begin following her sister. "Carol, do you know what you just said? I mean, we're both like the Kardashians, only more beautiful, and you're still trying to look humble," Kendall said, not really understanding what was going through her sister's head. "Kendall, when you're in love, none of that matters more than the person you love taking you in his strong arms and making you his again and again and again and again and again with that shame," Carol was saying, while her face was distorting from one of longing to one of pure perversity. "Okay, fine, I understand you don't need to give a lecture explaining how that Naruto guy is going to leave you in a wheelchair," Kendall interrupted, not really wanting to hear what her sister was going to say next. "Exactly. I just hope he takes me and puts me in an alley to buck me," the already ecstatic Carol was going to say, while some drool came out of the corner of her lips, however once again she was interrupted by Kendall. "Hey. Shut up. I told you I didn't want to hear your wet dreams," Kendall interrupted, already feeling a small migraine coming on. "Well, whatever, when you see it, you'll understand," Carol said calmly as she watched a bus stop in front of the stop that wasn't really far from her house. "And what exactly am I going to understand?" Kendall asked curiously as she watched Carol simply sit in one of the many free seats on the bus due to the area she was passing through at the moment. However, the curious Kendall simply followed her example and sat in the seat that had probably been used by an untold number of people just to pay attention to what her sister was about to say. "And why ruin the surprise?" Carol replied with a question of her own, implying that she wasn't going to give a concrete answer to the question she had asked earlier. Scene change 7 minutes before. Leaving a relatively competent house, revealing that the family who lived in said house had no financial problems, a brown-haired woman was leaving while she seemed to be harassed with a black-haired woman who appeared to be about 37 years old. This woman was presumably the mother of a somewhat annoyed and at the same time ashamed due to the questions asked by her own mother. "So? When are you going to introduce me to that Naruto guy? He's your boyfriend, right?" the mother asked with curiosity and slight hints of amusement. "Mom? I already told you he's not my boyfriend yet," replied the annoyed Dana while being followed by her mother, who seemed to be uninterested in stopping bothering her daughter. "Oh? Still. You should make it yours before someone else gets there first, the mother advised, as apparently the best advice she had said in the next 2 weeks. However, that thought was shattered into 1,000 pieces by what was said next. And try to use a condom. Premature pregnancies are happening very often, warned the mother with a rather childish expression. Note. While I was writing this scene, I remembered Komi's mother, Shuuko Komi. For those who don't know, look her up, so I couldn't help but think if it would be a good idea to put her in the story. Yes, that's how random ideas come to me every time I write a chapter. Well, this could be a spoiler or not. Mom? Are you aware of what you're saying? Asked the now very blushing Dana, who didn't know how to react to what her mother had said, since the idea of having sex with a blonde didn't seem like a bad idea. Well, as you wish, be careful on the road, the mother finally said goodbye, while giving a small hug to Dana, who simply nodded now with a slight controlled blush on her cheeks. Yes was Dana's only response, and then she started walking away from the house in the direction of the bus stop. Time jump 3:28 p.m. Berg, how much longer are you going to make me wait? A somewhat irritated Lori asked, only to simply let out a sigh while her shoulders slumped, implying how tense she had been a few moments ago. This brief moment of apparent tranquility was due to the absence of a certain blonde who at this moment had gone to the bathroom to obviously relieve himself. Now Lori, throughout the trip to the mall, couldn't maintain an active conversation with Naruto because of her nervousness at being face to face with the person she had been so intimately attached to a few moments ago. But now that Naruto was not in sight, she was able to take the liberty of calming down and thinking better about the events that had occurred some time ago. However, now that Lori thought about it better, this wasn't something that really had to worry her after all. They had slept together often when they were children, so there shouldn't be a reason to embarrass her now, so the blonde forced herself to relax with a new realization in mind. "I good much better," Lori said to herself, only to notice that a particular group of 3 girls that she recognized was approaching in her direction. Well, they seemed to be talking about anything. Once the 3 finally reached her presence, they simply proceeded to do the most common of them, which only consisted of greeting each other and hugging as if they hadn't seen each other for 3 years, or well, that was with Carol and Dana, since with Kendall, well, Lori and Dana hadn't spent much time with her, so they simply settled for giving her a simple greeting. "So where is it?" asked a somewhat excited Carol, who failed uselessly to hide her emotion. This could only bring out a vein of annoyance in Lori, who was about to answer only to be interrupted by Carol's sister. "Oh right, Carol hasn't stopped talking about this Naruto guy. She said he was your brother, right?" Kendall commented and asked, her interest already at its peak from hearing so much praise coming from her sister. "Well, actually we are stepbrothers," Lori replied, not seeing any real problem in revealing the detail. After all, most of the people who knew the Loud family knew that Naruto was adopted, or well, most of them deduced it, since the features of the older blonde did not look anything like either of the 2 parents. "Yeah, she's lucky to have the most exquisite piece of furniture in the world living in her house," Carol grumbled with a small pout as she crossed her arms, being watched by everyone present. "Honestly, when we talk about Naruto, his personality goes from being that of a refined girl to a total nymphomaniac," Dana commented with a drop of sweat on her forehead. "Don't even tell me I had to endure his lewd comments the entire trip about that Naru," Kendall was saying with an annoyed face, only to be interrupted by an obviously male and somewhat charming voice that curiously came from behind her, so she turned with an eyebrow raised to see the person who had interrupted her rant. However, that wasn't all she was going to do. No, Kendall was, so to speak, quite stressed, since first of all she had to come here when she didn't want to. Second, she had to listen to her sister's overly graphic explanations about how they would kick her ass to the back of her head, and now she was interrupted by a new person who had just appeared behind her back that this person had no consideration. But well, leaving aside her misfortunes of today, Kendall thought it would be a good idea to bring up one of her sister's famous pages when she rejected someone who asked her out, so preparing to make a fool of the guy behind her, she quickly turned around and then raised her gaze a little to see the man's face, while some words were already starting to come out of his mouth. "Look here, Troglodyte," Kendall was going to start speaking, however not a second after those words left her mouth and her brain analyzed the person in front of her. The next thing that happened was nothing after that point. Carol's blonde younger sister knew nothing more, well, to be more exact, her brain entered a state of total chaos while hundreds of billions of mini Kendalls ran all over the place in what looked like a wide field of office cubicles where only chaos reigned. "Fucking mother. What happened here?" yelled a Kendall who was dressed in a rather fine black secretary dress as she walked out of a more elegant office, and the sign manager hung on the door. However, not a second later a second Kendall in a slightly more ordinary secretary dress approached her. "Ma'am. We are suffering from an overload in the first central system of the right hemisphere of the brain," reported Kendall, an office worker, while behind her, at the back of the countless cubicles, some computers began to catch fire, causing smoke to billow everywhere. "What? How did this happen? Did our favorite Chanel bag break?" Manager Kendall asked with a visible tone of concern. No, ma'am, Kendall replied, the office worker imagining that terrible event and couldn't help but shudder. However, that wasn't the case. I know. Mom found out we bought that lewd underwear. She knew that stupid Carol was influencing us, guest manager Kendall, while grumbling about the last thing. However, she again received a refusal from the other Kendall, calming her down a bit. However, that meant something more atrocious had happened. Don't tell me Dad left us without an inheritance, said the manager Kendall with a pale face as she watched the other Kendall turn pale as well, along with many other Kendalls who heard the same thing. Oh God forbid, ma'am, but I'm afraid that's not the case either, replied the pale Kendall as more chaos took over the place. Shit. So what happened to make us like this? Have you checked the system? Manager Kendall asked angrily. Ma'am, the software systems are screwed, they're literally exploding, Kendall replied as a group of cubicles near them exploded, sending a pile of burning papers flying everywhere. But what caused all this anomaly? The manager asked herself, not knowing what to do. Well, we can ask the other offices if they know what's going on, the office worker offered, drawing the manager's attention, who considered the idea since the other offices could know. After all, the ones who are supposed to know everything are themselves. However, there was one office that could bring them closer to the answer. Very well, contact the heart offices, ask them what the emotional state is, ordered the manager, wondering if what the body felt was anguish, dread, fear or anything else. After all, if the answer was any of the aforementioned, they could associate it with the many possible events that led them to be in this state. Yes, ma'am, replied the office worker as she approached a random computer and began to type for a few seconds until she finally stopped typing and simply stood there waiting for an answer until finally an incoming video call came to the PC. However, before the office worker answered, the manager approached and answered for her, only to reveal a Kendall who was wearing the same outfit as the manager, only in red, while in the background a bunch of Kendalls could also be seen in apparent panic while they seemed to be transporting a bunch of sacks full of mini hearts. Hello, honey, can you tell me what's going on? The brain manager asked seriously. Oh hello brain, how long, greeted the heart manager with a strangely dreamy voice. Yes, whatever, explain to me what's going on, what's your relationship status? The brain manager demanded with annoyance. After all, she didn't really like talking from the heart. Oh wow, you don't know. We are suffering from a serious state of love, informed the heart manager while resting her cheek on one of her hands and smiling mischievously. Crush. Verse released a new clothing line. Manager Brain asked curiously, only to receive a funny chuckle from Manager Heart. Ahaha, no silly, what I mean is that we have fallen in love with someone, Manager Heart clarified with amusement, only for that statement to resonate like a kind of loudspeaker throughout all the offices of the brain, causing each and every one of the office neurons to stop in their tracks because of what they had heard and instead leaving a deafening silence in the area. I'm sorry, I think I didn't understand you well. Are you telling me that we fell in love with someone? Asked the brain manager, not really understanding what was going on. Exactly, he has a very charming face, give me a moment and I'll send an image to the entire system, said Manager Hart with a very loving voice. I hope it has a porch at least, an office worker said with interest. What rich family does he come from? Another office worker asked curiously. Oh no, he's not rich in the least, corrected Manager Hart, listening to the different questions from the office workers. Excuse me? Are you crazy at heart? How could you fall in love with a commoner? The brain manager was going to complain, only for the large image of a blonde boy to appear on each of the computers in the office. This was enough for any complaint that was about to come out of the brain manager to choke in her throat, and instead she let out a simple "Beautiful," whispered the brain manager, only to be imitated by the other office workers. Beautiful, said all the office workers in unison like a poetic chorus. Out of Kendall's brain. Beautiful, whispered the blonde with a completely transfixed face. Chapter 7. Hello girls, how are you? Was the greeting of a Naruto who kept a small smile on his face as he looked at those who were his sister, along with her two friends that he had known for quite some time. However, he did not know the fourth blonde girl who seemed to have joined the group, so looking at her carefully, Naruto ruled out the fact that this girl could be a classmate with his Lori, since the blonde herself appeared to be about 16 or 17 years old. Once that possibility was ruled out, the next one came, which may or may not be obvious. She was some relative of Carol or Dana, but if Naruto had to say something he would say that she was related to Carol, after all they shared the same shade of blonde. Oh? I see you brought someone else. Hello, my name is Naruto Loud, Naruto commented and introduced himself as he looked at the practically insane blonde who kept looking at him the whole time with that familiar look when you wake up too early and your shoe simply becomes the most interesting thing in the world. However, Naruto could only raise an eyebrow when the girl's perplexed face slowly turned a rather bright pink until she finally whispered something that the small group could hear. How beautiful, was the blonde's whisper, while Naruto simply rubbed the back of his neck as a sign that he was flattered while a charming smile appeared on his face. Ah, thank you very much Naruto said as he looked up at the group of girls in search of a name. Oh yes, that's true Naruto, she's my sister Kendall. This hot eye here is Naruto, Carol presented with a smile, well as if she had woken up from a long dream, the aforementioned was finally able to come out of her small stroke. Yes and I'm Kendall, your wife, I mean Carol's sister, Kendall finally spoke, a mess of stutters, increasing her embarrassment at making a fool of herself with the most attractive person she had ever seen in her entire life. I'm Naruto, Lori's brother, Naruto introduced himself as he pointed to Lori, who seemed to have a vein on her forehead because of how they were monopolizing her ray of sunshine for themselves. Nice to meet you Naruto, Kendall said, under Carol's arrogant gaze, as she waited for the moment to tell her sister the famous words I told you so. The pleasure is mine, Naruto replied only to feel a smiling Dana approach him with the intention of greeting him. Hello Naruto, how's everything? Dana greeted calmly while Naruto gave her a thoughtful look until she finally decided to answer. Pretty good, and you? How's it going with that game I lent you? Naruto replied and asked while the brunette's smile widened a little when her secret love touched on the subject of video games, since they both seemed to share a taste for video games, however that didn't stop her from crossing her arms with some annoyance at not being able to overcome a specific part of the game. Erg, those damn Ish and Ashina and Emma won't let me advance, Dana responded with annoyance when she remembered the boss that she couldn't kill, however this comment only made Naruto laugh. You know that's an optional boss, right? Naruto commented playfully, only for Dana to look at him with determined eyes. Yes, I know, but if I'm going to beat this game I have to destroy all the bosses, replied Dana with determination while on one side were the other girls watching and listening to the small interaction. Cough, are you done? Was the question of an irritated Lori as she approached Naruto and took him by the arm. If you're already done, why don't we start with what we came to do? Lori suggested as she began to drag Naruto to some random clothing store. Okay, let's go, Naruto let himself be led, while the three remaining girls could only watch, as Lori gave them an arrogant look that said Naruto is mine, don't get involved. Staying in a somewhat awkward silence, Carol, Dana and Kendall could only stay put, while the common bustle of people walking and talking resonated throughout, however the three of them simply raised their heads with noticeable veins on their foreheads, while they thought in unison. Ooh, we're going to get so into it that we'll get rid of him, thought a serious Carol and Dana. Now Kendall still seemed to be a little stunned by what was happening to her at this moment after all, she felt that tickling in her stomach, she literally noticed how her shirt and tracksuit on top of her chest moved with pulsations, as an indication of an obvious nervousness that she herself had never experienced. What's wrong with me? Was the mental question Kendall asked herself as she unconsciously began to follow the group. What was wrong with her? She had no answer to that. Well, actually, she did have an answer, she simply didn't want to accept it, however, sooner or later she would have to accept it. 21 minutes later. So? How does it look on me? Was the question of a flirtatious Carol as she came out of the dressing room wearing a loose moss-colored blouse, along with tight cream-colored pants. It should be noted that while she was modeling for Naruto, she turned around and stuck her butt out more so the blonde could observe her more. Quite nice, I give it a 7 out of 10, but what if you use this one, it will surely look amazing on you, Naruto qualified as if he were some kind of judge in a fashion show. The way he analyzed the clothes was so intense that the store manager was watching the blonde thinking that he really was the owner of some kind of famous boutique or something like that. Yes, dear. Carol accepted happily as she took the dress that Naruto offered her with joy, since it felt good to have the gaze of the boy you like on you. A couple more seconds passed, and Naruto rummaged through a pile of clothes that he had gathered along with the others that were in the dressing rooms, until he finally found another outfit that he considered would be perfect for Dana, who didn't take long to leave. What do you think of this one? Asked the brunette while wearing a somewhat large sweater, along with jeans ripped at the thighs and a coat open in the middle. She looked like a girl who was about to go skateboarding. It looks pretty good on you, said Naruto as he approached a brown-haired girl, only to pass his two hands through both sides of her waist and with a fluid movement proceed to tighten the sweater a little, revealing more of Dana's slender figure that he could only observe with a small blush. I give you an 8, Naruto calmly rated as he proceeded to take the outfit he had chosen for her and offer it to her. Here, try this on, you're sure to draw all eyes to you with this, Naruto declared with a smile, while the still blushing Dana nodded as she took the clothes and went back into the dressing room, being watched by the blonde who set out to look for an outfit for Lori or Kendall or whoever came out first. However, before he even started looking in the pile of clothes, a voice caught his attention, so looking up from the pile of clothes, Naruto noticed a man of about 57 years old, wearing what was an elegant suit approaching him. Now Naruto was not surprised when he saw these types of elegant people, since this store they were in was so to speak a store that was dedicated only to selling particularly expensive brands, with brands like Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Fendi, Prada, Calvin Klein, etc. And although Naruto really did not have enough money to buy a wide variety of clothes, it was still enough for him to buy about 3 or 4 outfits for his beloved sister, but well. Leaving it behind, Naruto simply proceeded to pay attention to what the man would have to say to him. "Good afternoon, young man," the man greeted with a tone of elegance that would only be seen in high societies. However, not really caring about that detail in the man's speech, Naruto simply responded calmly. "Good afternoon, sir, how can I help you?" Naruto greeted and questioned with relative calm, while the older man gave him a business smile. "Excuse my manners, let me introduce myself. My name is Bruno Lennox, and I am the manager of the store." The man introduced himself calmly, while extending his hand to Naruto, who nodded and returned the handshake. "Nice to meet you, my name is Naruto Loud." Naruto introduced himself calmly, while the manager remained in thoughtful silence for a moment as he tried to find a fashion designer, brand, or boutique that had that name. However, he stopped trying when he didn't find one and simply attributed it to the fact that the young man in front of him didn't have his name as a brand. "Excuse me, but are those your models over there?" the manager asked, not really bothering to ask if they were doing a test tour of some stores, since that was seen often from time to time. But on the other hand, Naruto raised an eyebrow at Mr. Bruno's question. Now he didn't really know how to answer the man, because although they were modeling clothes for the one in charge of giving them the opinion of a man, they didn't really consider themselves his models in a way. Naruto thought for a moment that the older man thought he was the owner of some modeling company. That would be simply absurd, so for the moment he would give him a somewhat doubtful answer. "In fact, we are together," Naruto replied without really answering the question he asked him. However, this answer made Mr. Bruno come to another conclusion, in which he couldn't help but give a big smile to the young man in front of him. "Would it be possible for me to have a moment of your attention?" asked the manager with that business smile that Naruto noticed. However, he would continue listening to what the man would say. Time jump 5 days later. "So was it worth it?" was the question of a smiling Erika, who was lying on a rather large bed, while a sheet was the only thing covering her naked body. This question was directed to a Naruto who was currently putting on his pants. However, the question made the blonde stop for a moment to give his boss a look of confusion. "What are you talking about?" Naruto asked in confusion to Erika, who simply let out a small giggle. "Come on, don't pretend. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Erika responded with some mockery as she proceeded to show him something on her cell phone. Now Naruto was surprised. He didn't give a hint of it and instead simply finished buttoning his pants and zipping them up. "I would say it was worth it," the blonde finally answered, since what the black-haired girl had shown him was a photo in which he appeared modeling a rather expensive set of clothes, while Lori, Carol, Kendall and Dana also modeled equally expensive and elegant sets. Just below the image, the name of the store where they were shopping that day remained. "Oh? And why would that be?" Erika asked, quite curious about this new event that had occurred, since she didn't expect her favorite employee to be modeling for such a famous store. "Well, they gave us a pretty juicy pay just for a photoshoot," Naruto replied without stopping at all as he put on his sweater, and it was true, although they hadn't given him a sum larger than his salary, it was still much more than what he would earn in a single day of work. In addition, they also gave them the clothes they modeled as a gift. "It can't be, my dear, Naruto is cheating on me, even though I'm raising his salary and giving him weekends off," were the false complaints of a tearful Erika that caught the attention of a Naruto, who simply gave her a smile at the childish attitude that his boss sometimes took. "Who knows, maybe I can and dedicate myself better to being a model," Naruto commented mockingly, making Erika stop her childish tantrum and with an expressionless face look at him. "Don't even think about doing that," Erika warned seriously, causing Naruto's left eyebrow to rise in confusion at the sudden change in mood. However, he didn't have to ponder much further when the black-haired woman he had had sex with a few minutes earlier added something else to her comment. "Because if you leave, this gym will go bankrupt," added Erika, effectively making Naruto sweat drop, who simply approached her and calmly ruffled her hair. "Calm down, modeling doesn't seem to be my thing, so I'm going to continue being your employee for a long time," Naruto reassured Erika, who simply let herself be carried away by the caress until the blonde stopped caressing her and moved away from her. "Okay, I have to go. I promised Lin that I would accompany her to her soccer championship," Naruto finished, moving away from the black-haired girl who just watched as the blonde left the room, leaving her alone in her luxurious apartment. "Yes, I won't let you get away from me," Erika said to herself in a whisper that only she could hear. Change of scene. Naruto had to curse the exact time a traffic light decided to change color when he was going to take the entrance to the right that was a few meters away. Now although that was not a reason to get upset, the fact that it had already happened to him 5 times was already annoying, and more so because he was the only car driving on the road, since many of the people at this time were at their exhausting 12-hour jobs, while he only worked 8. But while leaving his annoyance aside, Naruto simply let himself fall into his seat while the silence covered the entire car and the heat from the car's heater warmed his skin. However, before he could completely relax, the vibration of his cell phone in his right pants pocket alerted him of an incoming chat, so moving his hand to his pocket, Naruto took out his cell phone to then see in the notification window a message from Luz. "Hello, Naruto," was the greeting Luz sent, and Naruto read it, bringing a small smile to the blonde who unlocked his cell phone and began to write his response. "What's up, Luz, is everything okay?" Naruto greeted and asked, only for the 2 hooks that indicated the message had been sent to turn blue, indicating it was seen. "Everything's okay, Naruto, are you busy today?" asked a brunette, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow in thought, since he actually had to get home to pick up Lin and take her to her soccer game, but that still depended on what he needed it for. "Well, it depends on what you need me for," Naruto replied calmly as he watched the online message under Luz's name on WhatsApp change to typing. A few seconds later, Naruto got his answer. "I wanted to know if I could stay overnight at your house," Luz suggested, apparently taking into account what he had said the previous time when they were returning from training. The answer was actually obvious. "Sure. I'll pick you up," Naruto replied as he looked at the time on his cell phone and noticed he still had time for that. "Okay, I'll be waiting for you," was Luz's response, leaving the conversation there. So leaving the cell phone in the passenger seat, Naruto finally looked ahead, noticing that the traffic light had been green for a good couple of seconds, so accelerating, Naruto didn't take the entrance to the right and instead continued straight in the direction of a certain brunette's house. 18 minutes later and a stop at the McDonald's drive-thru for a Big Mac with fries and soda. Naruto parked in front of the dilapidated house that was almost standing from Luz, who was already waiting for him in front of the house on the wax while a little snow had accumulated on her head. Without letting another second pass, Luz almost trotted in front of the car with joy and then jumped into the car as usual and gave a hug to the blonde, who responded with a smile. "Hi. Thanks for coming to pick me up," Luz greeted happily, then smelled the familiar smell of a hamburger in the warm air of the car. Naruto pulled away from the hug and gave her a look of fake confusion upon realizing that she had already noticed his little gift. "Naruto, I've already told you that it's not necessary," Luz was going to reply only for her stomach to growl as if saying shut up, "can't you see I'm hungry?" So Luz could only pout with a little pink powder while she looked away and took the food. "Enjoy," it was the only thing Naruto said as he began to walk away from Luz's house in the direction of his own. Scene break. "Okay, we're here," Naruto commented, parking in front of the house, effectively drawing Luz's attention, since it would be normal for Naruto to park the car inside the garage. This only meant one thing: Naruto wasn't going to stay in the house, at least for a while. Naruto, are you going out?" Luz asked with some nervousness, since although she was still somewhat nervous about staying at Naruto's house after a long time, the fact that he wasn't there with her made her even more nervous, especially since her sisters had a particular hatred towards her. "Oh yeah, I'm going to accompany Lin to a soccer game," Naruto responded calmly, then honked the horn alerting them of his arrival. Now Luz wouldn't be able to stand even a second in Naruto's house, enduring the scrutinizing looks of her sisters, so she quickly devised a plan and an idea came to her head. "Can I go with you?" Luz asked, since even though she was still going to get Lin's glare, it was still only her, so it was bearable. Naruto on the other hand gave her a thoughtful look, since if she was taking Luz, well, there was really no reason not to take the brunette unless the $15 she had to pay for her ticket was an impediment, which it wasn't. "Okay, did you bring a coat?" Naruto accepted and asked, making Luz let out a sigh and then nodded his question. Almost as if this had been synchronized, the door of the house opened with a bang, from which a smiling Lin came out, wearing her team's uniform, and over it, a somewhat large coat that covered her almost completely. On her back she had a backpack from which she obviously carried her accessories for the game. Naruto's brunette stepsister ran with a pretty big smile on her face, however this smile slowly decreased as did her race, until she finally reached the car in a slow and clumsy trot. However, Lin made a brutal effort not to frown when she finally identified the other person next to Naruto in the car. "Hey Lin, ready to score a couple of goals?" Naruto cheered without really noticing her apparent annoyed mood due to Luz's presence. However, in the face of all adversity, she simply left her bad mood in a corner and acted as if she didn't exist. "Hello Lin," was Luz's almost whispered greeting to her brown-haired companion, hoping for a return greeting. However, it never came and instead she responded to Naruto's greeting. You can be sure that I'm going to destroy the opponent, Lin replied with a smile as she ignored Luz and opened Naruto's door to pass over the blonde who only leaned back to let her pass. However, in Luz's eyes, the athlete was obviously trying to pass with her body so close to the blonde that it almost seemed illegal in many ways. This of course got a frown from Luz until finally Lin reached the back seat. Very well, let's go then, said Naruto as he started the car without really noticing the tense atmosphere. Scene break. For Luz, these were surely the most agonizing 28 minutes of her entire life. Forget about the constant insults from her parents and the multiple attempts at bullying on the cheerleading team, but the fact of having one of the sisters of the man she liked looking at her with disapproval made her fear that her feelings could never be reached by the blonde, since it was not unknown to anyone who knew the blonde that he loved his sisters very much. But leaving that aside, he was now putting on his coat against the cold and then walking to Naruto's right while Lin was happily smiling on the other side of the blonde. In front of them was one of those synthetic courts that the government made for the public, with about 6 stands spread around it. Unlike other times when small groups of teenagers or children played to pass the time, this time there was certainly a considerable amount of people around, sitting in the stands or buying hot dogs from the typical man with his cart on the side of the court. Finally arriving at the Naruto players' box, along with Lin and Luz, they saw the group of girls that made up the team to which Lin belonged. On one side, sitting in a chair, was the coach, and I say this because he was just a somewhat obese man, about 55 years old, who didn't seem to care if the team won the game, judging by the slight snoring he was doing, while trying to hide his nap with some glasses that were about to fall off. Naruto actually let out a sigh upon seeing this, however he stopped looking at the coach upon hearing the joint greeting from Lin's teammates. The Luo Naruto. They all greeted with happy smiles upon seeing the one they all considered their second trainer, if not the main one, since unfortunately he was the sleeping man on the other side. Now, why did they consider Naruto their second coach? Well, since Naruto had actually joined a soccer team at school before, the blonde gave them tips and advice on how they could improve their shooting, dribbling, passing, etc. Hey girls, how are you? Naruto greeted with a smile as everyone responded with a fine. I see the coach is busy, Naruto said with disappointment, causing the group of girls to only do the same. Well anyway, I came to bring Lin, Naruto said, letting his sister, who was just watching the interaction, join her group of classmates with a smile. Hey girls, are you ready to win? Lin greeted cheerfully only to receive groans from the others. I doubt it, Lin, we haven't won a game since our previous coach left and left us with him, was the complaint of a girl with red hair and the same height as Lin, although most were almost the same height. It's true, we were already eliminated from the Division 6 Youth Cup, was the depressing response of another girl, this time with light blue hair, causing Lin to frown since they were actually right. This was heard by Naruto and Luz, who stayed close to the blonde the whole time, who gave the sleeping coach a sideways glance, only to see a board with a couple of sheets with apparent scribbles. So approaching before Luz's attentive gaze, Naruto took the sheet-sized board on which the sheets were only to begin to analyze the scribbles and understand that they were game tactics. No wonder they haven't won a single match, was what Naruto said, drawing the attention of the entire team who looked at the blonde who was changing leaves. Those are the tactics the coach makes us train, another girl commented, recognizing the board with leaves. However, before anyone could do or say anything, Naruto took the leaves and crumpled them up, then dropped them on the floor. What are you doing, Naruto? Lin asked with concern, seeing her tactics made a mess. However, Naruto simply gave her a smile, and the next thing he said caught everyone's attention. There's going to be a change in the team's tactics, Naruto informed everyone who was watching him in silence. But Naruto, how are we going to adapt to a new game mode in such a short time? Asked a girl who was presumably the goalkeeper, judging by the gloves on her hands. Oh, don't worry, this is a simple but effective tactic, Naruto commented as he took a new leaf to sit on and gestured for everyone to come closer and listen to the explanation. So obeying the request of their second trainer, they all made a circle around Naruto and began to listen. Alright, let's start with a 4-3-3 formation. Biki, you're going to be the left back, Naruto started only to be interrupted by the aforementioned. But Naruto, I'm a left midfielder, Biki replied in confusion, only for Naruto to nod. Yes, I know, but let's leave the questions for the end, Naruto commented, continuing with the explanation. Okay, Lin will be the center forward, Kimberly will be the right forward, Naruto named, this time not receiving any complaints, since the two mentioned did play in that position. Sami, Sophia and Kathy will be the midfielders, Naruto informed, this time putting a right midfielder as a center midfielder, but they didn't reply and continued listening. The defenses will be Nathalie, Melanie, Anna and Stephanie, Naruto named, this time perfectly naming the three defense as well. Well, the goalkeeper will be Ainz. Finally, she named it, letting everyone see the formation and letting them ask the question to continue with the tactics. But Naruto, why did you put in two players who don't play in that position? The one who asked the question was Luz, who had gotten involved in the tactic Naruto used. Good question. That's because this is the formation they will take when they have possession of the ball, that is to say this is the offensive formation, said Naruto, confusing everyone a little since, although they understood what he said, they didn't understand the fact that he said it in a way that this formation was not the only one, and his answer came in Naruto taking out another sheet of paper and starting to draw. When they lose the ball, Biki will go from being a left back to a left midfielder, while Kathy, who played as a central midfielder, will go from being a right midfielder to her original position, and finally, Kimberly will accompany Lin as a forward, thus converting the formation from a 4-3-3 to a 4-4-2, giving them more chances of recovering the ball, Naruto explained with a smile to the girls, who didn't have to listen to the explanation twice to understand what Naruto wanted to tell them. Any questions? Naruto asked, only to receive that silence when the teacher asked something in class and no student answers, however unlike that Naruto could see that everyone understood perfectly. Very well then, go and make me proud, said Naruto, without noticing that in reality his interaction with the team was being watched by all the parents who came to support their daughters and well some other teenagers who thought the interaction was sweet and were talking to their group of friends about how handsome Naruto looked. Yes, was the loud roar of the girls who rushed to the court when they noticed that the other team was starting to settle on the court, leaving behind a Naruto next to Luz, who approached Naruto to sit next to him with a smile. That was quite clever and cute, Naruto commented, drawing Naruto's attention as he didn't understand the last thing, so noticing his crush's confusion, Luz just let out a giggle. I mean, how you seem to be a real trainer giving instruction to a group of 12-year-old girls, Luz explained to Naruto, who just smiled in response. Well, I had to help you somehow, was his response as he turned his gaze to the court where the girls were taking the formation he had indicated, however before another second had passed Naruto felt Luz lean on his shoulder as a way of seeking warmth. So following her example, Naruto wrapped his arm around her to pull her closer to him, without knowing that the teenagers who were watching him were disappointed to think that he had already been taken by the brown-haired girl, who was blushing a little strongly due to the cold, but more due to Naruto's touch. Chapter 8. Knock knock was the recognizable sound of a door being knocked on by someone, this action with the obvious intention of getting the attention of the person on the other side of the door, however this didn't seem to work as he didn't receive a single sign of response on the other side, so knocking on the door again, this time accompanying it with a phrase, the blonde protagonist proceeded to speak. Lin, come on, open up, I want to talk to you, Naruto called his younger sister, who showed no intention of answering the call. Lin, please, I brought you some ice cream, you don't want it to melt. Naruto again tried to get his sister to open the door, and although it still didn't open, Naruto was finally able to get a response from the brown-haired girl. Then leave it in the fridge, Lin replied, to which Naruto simply shook his head. I don't think so. Down there are a pair of very hungry blonde twins, hoping you won't accept their offering from me, Naruto replied, leaving an awkward silence in the hallway that could only be matched by that time when he forgot to close the bathroom door when he was taking a shower in the morning and all his sisters saw him naked. Is it chocolate? Lin's slightly louder voice asked on the other side of the door, indicating that she had approached the door. Yes, Naruto answered almost immediately, causing the brunette to ask another question almost at the same moment that Naruto answered. With almonds? Lin asked. Yes, Naruto replied calmly, raising the medium-sized ice cream container to his face. Do you have candy in the sink? Lin asked again, to which Naruto replied. At the top and at the bottom, Naruto replied, causing the brown-haired girl on the other side to bite her lower lip. Did you bring? Lin was going to ask one last question, only to be interrupted by Naruto. Yes, I also brought marshmallows with vanilla frosting, said Naruto, causing an overwhelming silence in which a single click could be heard throughout the almost dark hallway. Come in, said Lin, slightly opening the door, revealing that she was still wearing her football team uniform and her eyes were a little red, obviously from crying. Without wasting time, Naruto advanced into the dimly lit room and then closed the door behind him. Meanwhile in the living room, drip was the drop of sweat that could have almost splashed someone due to how big it had been produced by a certain brunette who was unfortunately still friends with the older blonde. Naruto, why did you leave me alone here? Luz almost screamed in her mind as she was being stared at scrupulously by each of the blonde stepsisters. What the hell is she doing here? I thought we had already gotten rid of her, thought a somewhat annoyed Lori, having the presence of the brunette in front of her, this of course, without knowing that her other sisters had almost the same thoughts. I say the same because although each one still despised the nervous Luz, they still varied in intensity and ways of thinking. Let's take as an example the always kind Lini. I haven't seen Luz in a while, should I say hi? No wait, she's after Naruto, I can't let her stay with him, but I like her, what should I do? Those were the thoughts of the second oldest sister who, while still bothered by the fact that Luz was interested in Naruto, she still couldn't get really angry about it. After all, it wasn't in her nature to be irritating. So you said you were going to stay the night? Rocker Luna declared, looking at her brunette companion with a slight frown. Yeah, I asked Naruto to let me spend the night, Luz stated, causing the sisters to look at her with raised eyebrows. And has he told you where you're going to sleep? The almost invisible Lucy asked Luz, who had to shake her head. Perfect, there's an old sofa in the garage, you can sleep there, a smiling Lola quickly offered with a rather innocent smile that didn't match the rather cruel suggestion she offered to the brunette who was sweating more from nervousness. Naruto, please come help me, begged the nervous Luz as she listened to the increasingly cruel suggestions her crush's stepsisters were making. Back with Naruto. I don't know why I keep trying so hard, we haven't been able to win a match in a while, Lin said sadly as she brought a spoonful of ice cream to her mouth. However, once she started to taste the ice cream, she quickly felt Naruto's hand on her head, so she looked up, still with the spoon in her mouth, and looked at Naruto, who smiled calmly at her. Lin, you know none of that is true, you have so much potential ahead of you, it simply hasn't been taken advantage of by the coach. Naruto tried to cheer up the brown-haired girl, although it worked a little, it still wasn't enough to lift her spirits completely, so cleaving herself further over her brother's chest, the brunette settled better. That's right, Lin and Naruto were sitting on the brown-haired girl's bed with her sitting between the doors to Naruto's. But what should I do? The coach doesn't even have interest in the team, Lin complained again, frowning as she remembered the fat man who only spent his time sleeping. This statement left Naruto somewhat thoughtful, so looking at a calendar on the wall, Naruto noticed that he had some free time. You know what, I'll take care of that, for the next training they have, that asshole is going to want to turn them into the best team in the world, Naruto declared calmly, already thinking of something to talk to the coach. This statement made Lin raise an eyebrow in curiosity, however, as quickly as she appreciated this it was replaced by one of happiness. After all, Naruto was known for persuading anyone with a single conversation. An example was when a teacher was harassing Lini to sleep with him to improve her grades. Needless to say that after Naruto had the conversation with the teacher, he did not want to get closer to Lini or any of the sisters. Thanks, Naruto thanked Lin as she left the almost empty ice cream container on a nightstand and then gave a hug to the older blonde who didn't hesitate to wrap his arms around the brown-haired girl's slim waist. 10 minutes later. What about the old doghouse? It's still pretty good since Pashi left us, suggested a smiling Luna, remembering the little house that was still in the backyard. However, after that suggestion followed a wave of murmurs that left a quite pale Luz. How was it possible that they could be so cruel to her? However, the murmurs stopped quickly when a blonde came down the stairs with a satisfied smile at being able to help his sister who had fallen asleep either from tiredness of crying or from the lost game. Once our blonde protagonist finished going down the stairs, he could notice two things. First was the almost comically tearful look of his brunette friend towards him, almost telling him that it was a relief to see him. The second thing he noticed was the fact that his sisters were looking at him with those slightly averted eyes that made it clear the fact that they had been bothering the brown-haired Luz. Now, Naruto was no fool. He knew that his sisters didn't like the always happy Luz. That had been a topic he had discussed with them several times, and several times the discussion ended with them getting annoyed for a short time with him or Naruto, simply sighing and leaving the topic aside. It was strange, because his sisters didn't accept that Luz tried something with him. Of course, Naruto always noticed the feelings of the girls towards him, but why not those of his sisters? This was obvious because he confused the affections of his stepsisters as simple sisterly affection. On the other hand, with Luz, Naruto knew for quite some time that the brunette had some feelings for him, and Naruto wasn't going to rush her. It will take its time. It's already gotten very late, Naruto commented as he looked away in the direction of the clock hanging on the wall marking 11:47 p.m. The girls received a message that they had to go to sleep, so approaching in a line and Naruto standing next to the stairs, each one said goodnight in their own way. For her part, Luz had a seriously nervous smile that she tried to hide when each and every one of Naruto's sisters looked at her with looks of superiority at the moment they hugged the blonde and glued their attributes that went from greater to more humble. Once the group of loud girls finally went up to their rooms for a well-deserved rest from a day atrophied by school, Naruto and Luz were left in the living room in a somewhat awkward silence because Luz didn't know what to do and above all, she didn't know where she would sleep or well. This time she didn't know. After all the previous times she came, she had stayed overnight with one of the blonde sisters because for some reason the blonde's mother seemed reluctant to have them sleep together. Well, come on, let's go to sleep, Naruto commented, signaling the brown-haired girl to follow him. Doing that, Luz followed Naruto to what she thought was one of her sister's rooms. However, as they walked forward and past the rooms, Luz finally saw Naruto open the door to his room and let her in. What? You're not going to come in? Naruto asked, noticing that Luz didn't move from her spot. But your mother doesn't like us sleeping together, Luz replied, only for Naruto to quietly stand behind her and gently push her into the room. But she's on a business trip, so there's no problem, Naruto said in a whisper, closing the door behind him to prevent his sisters from hearing what he said. Once inside, Naruto surrounded the brown-haired girl to calmly go to the bed and sit down while he saw the somewhat tense sister, Luz. Luz? What's wrong? Are you feeling bad? Naruto asked, to which Luz quickly shook her head and responded with denial. No, I'm okay, it's just a little nervous, you know it's been a while since I stayed at your house, Luz replied, to which Naruto understood the answer and simply nodded. Oh come on, you don't have to worry, just think that here in this room it's just you and me, Naruto tried to calm the brown-haired girl who remained thoughtful while visualizing what Naruto said and continued talking. Just relax and do what you want, Naruto said calmly. Do what I want, Luz said almost as a question that didn't need an answer. Yes, Naruto affirmed, watching how Luz advanced towards him and then, without him really expecting it, she sat astride him. Can I really do whatever I want? Luz asked Naruto, who stared at the brunette for a few seconds until he finally and slowly moved his hands towards Luz's thin waist, who tried hard not to flinch from the blonde's grip. Yes, Naruto finally answered, destroying any chain that clung to the thin girl who, without waiting any longer, connected her lips with Naruto, who did not hesitate to respond to the relatively clumsy kiss, but as the kisses progressed, he was getting better. Breaking the kiss due to the need for air, a watery Naruto and Luz looked at each other, while their breaths mixed between the two. Are you sure about this? Naruto asked in a whisper to the thin brunette, who responded by joining lips once again in another passionate kiss, while she slowly felt Naruto guide his hands towards her buttocks under her spandex pants. However, more than trying to prevent the blonde from putting his hands under her pants, Luz instead stopped wrapping her arms around Naruto's neck and somewhat clumsily began to take off her jacket along with her shirt, leaving only her bra that covered her certainly small breasts, but not enough to not notice they were there. Not wanting to be left behind and inhibit the brown-haired girl, Naruto followed her example and took off his sweatshirt along with his sweater, leaving him only in pants in a dark room that was only being illuminated by the headlight on one side of the house, causing the small specks of snow to make small shadows on the two now completely naked bodies that continued to kiss passionately. Naruto Luz began, breaking the kiss with Naruto, who looked at her calmly, waiting to hear what she wanted to say. I want to do it with you, the brown-haired girl finally asked Naruto, who simply nodded with a reassuring smile and then picked up the thin, little raft Luz and carefully placed her on the bed on her back while he stood on top of her without taking their eyes off her. I'll be gentle, Naruto reassured in a whisper as he began to descend, while Luz looked confused, not knowing what the blonde was going to do. What are you going to? Luz was going to ask only to feel Naruto move her panties aside a little and then feel what she could describe as the most satisfying sensation of her life that combined tingling, warmth, slipping and finally a feeling of contraction that started from her crotch until finally all her muscles sank into extreme relaxation. 47 minutes later. Luz could say with certainty that she had never been so tired as she was right now, leave aside her cheerleading practices, the constant fights between her parents, the insults directed at her by them, the attempts at bullying by her fellow cheerleaders, none of it compared to the tiredness she was feeling now, and yet this tiredness was like therapy for her. A therapy that was slowly slipping out of her, followed by a glob of thick white liquid that didn't seem to decrease in size, despite it being the third time the blonde had cum. Naruto had made her discover a new world, a world full of pleasure and desire for each other, a pleasure that was not even close to ending, when Luz heard the lash of the condom being replaced by another, and then she was accommodated in the mythical doggy-style position, and as if her body was eagerly awaiting it, Luz prepared herself for the penetration that did not take long to expand her vaginal walls, providing a pleasure beyond imagination. So once again and for the fourth time the room was plunged into the already recognizable and rhythmic clashes of flesh that did not leave the room due to the covering of the walls with sponges that absorbed most of the noise in the room. Chapter 9. 8:30 a.m. Silence in many ways had been a concept that Naruto had almost never had in his life, or well, at least when he was accompanied. After all, whenever he had someone by his side, the most normal thing was to be in a casual conversation about some triviality or some other important thing. However, this morning was something peculiarly special if Naruto had to put an end to the situation he was in at the moment. The morning had been like any other morning in the Loud House. In fact, Naruto could say that everything had been repeated as a practiced routine from the beginning. He had gotten up early as always, he had taken his shower quietly as always, while Sabia had left his friend Luz sleeping in his bed. Naruto really didn't know how to refer to her after what they were doing last night. But well, for the moment he would continue treating her as usual until she brought up the subject. After all, women were the experts in these matters of bringing up random topics that left men in a difficult position. After his morning shower, Naruto went to the kitchen with the sole purpose of preparing breakfast for his 9 sisters and Luz, who showed no signs of waking up soon. His mother Rita along with his little sister Lily had not yet arrived from their business trip if Ancilla's absence was anything to go by. As if the usual routine showed no signs of changing at all, his sisters finally made an appearance, along with the inevitable fuss they caused when trying to use the bathtub. In fact, Naruto could say that these ways of waking up from his sisters always amused him for the simple fact of always hearing the same excuses and complaints from his sisters. Naruto could make a catalogue of all the complaints his sisters made until none were missing, but well, leaving that aside, today in particular, his sisters' discussion seemed not to last as long as their fights always did, and it was at this point that the usual routine began to take a different direction than usual. Since after a couple of minutes in which everyone had finally taken a turn to shower, a sleepy Luz finally made an appearance as she came down the stairs before the curious gaze of a blonde who noticed how the short brunette was wearing one of her t-shirts. "Good morning," greeted a Luz who simply approached the blonde, only to plant his face in the firm but somewhat padded pectorals of a Naruto, who simply let out an amused chuckle. "Good morning," Naruto greeted in the same way, simply putting his fingers between the brown hair of a Luz, who simply let out a small grunt of satisfaction. "Your sisters are very noisy." Finally, after a couple of seconds of silence, Luz spoke, causing Naruto to have no way of replying to that statement. After all, the brunette was right. "Yeah, well, you get used to it with time," Naruto replied as he pulled the brunette's face from his chest and then sat her down on one of the chairs at the table. "I'm surprised you're not wearing one of my boxers," Naruto mocked, gesturing that the brunette was wearing one of his shirts. "Yes, in fact I thought about it, but I couldn't find one," Luz replied with an equally mocking voice as she watched the blonde head to the kitchen in search of a couple of plates. "Diggle, I guess I had to give you a tour of my room to tell you where they were," said Naruto as he placed a plate in front of the brunette and another on her stand. However, instead of sitting down, Naruto went back to the kitchen to get the rest of the plates. "You should have done it," Luz declared, only to feel a cold gaze fixated on the back of her neck, causing her to stop in her attempt to take a piece of pancake and instead slowly turn her gaze in the direction of said gaze, only to see a Lori looking at her with such contempt that Luz couldn't help but shudder. "Ugh, air." "Good morning," Naruto greeted a Lori who rushed towards a Naruto who almost dropped the plates. Good morning, Lori," Naruto greeted as he left the plates on the table without the aforementioned woman stopping hugging the blonde, so once he left the plates, Naruto finally returned the hug to an abnormally affectionate Lori. Okay, Naruto knew that each of his sisters were always affectionate with him and in turn he was also affectionate with them, but today Lori was being particularly more affectionate than usual. "Good morning, Naruto." Naruto heard the voice of a happy Luna who jumped and clung to the back of the blonde who felt the small weight of his rocker sister. However, before Naruto even had the chance to respond, the rest of his sisters appeared like a wave of girls who ended up clinging to a Naruto who now only his eyes could be seen. "Good morning, Naruto," they all greeted in unison, surrounding a blonde man who could only stay there while they all hugged him tightly. Without Naruto noticing, they all gave him a threatening look that said, "Don't mess with Naruto," to Luz, who perfectly understood the message and who for a moment was intimidated by the looks. However, after a couple of seconds, Luz finally swallowed and then decided that she wouldn't let them intimidate her anymore, so instead, the brunette simply gave them a look of self-sufficiency that said, "Don't get involved." "Ha, last night Naruto got deep inside me," was the message that, although it wasn't interpreted that way by the sisters, they still had to suppress a twitch in their eyebrows at the boar in front of them. 25 minutes later. "Well, and how was breakfast?" was the question that a nervous Naruto asked with the sole purpose of breaking the deadly silence that was making his hair stand on end. However, his question, rather than being answered by his sisters who were the ones who always praised his cooking, this time it was Luz who answered the blonde's question. "It was finger-licking good," Luz replied to Naruto while emphasizing the word suck, causing a drop of sweat to run down Naruto's temple, who simply nodded at the peculiar answer. This of course made each of his sisters present look at her with more intensity. "Thanks, well, I'm going to the bathroom." Unable to stand the uncomfortable atmosphere anymore, Naruto finally decided to leave the place for a while and get some fresh air, although thinking about it, the bathroom wasn't the best place to get some fresh air, but preferring that to being here a second longer, Naruto simply got up and then left the place. A couple of seconds of silence in which the footsteps of a retreating Naruto were no longer heard, and irritated Lola was finally the first to speak while hitting her palms on the table. "Okay, boar, what's up with Naruto?" was the question asked by Lola, who completely ignored the reproachful looks of her older sisters for the rude word that her younger sister shouldn't know. However, ignoring it for the moment, they simply paid attention to what the brunette had to say. "I think it should be more than obvious." Luz's response was like an anger interrupter that made most of the girls look at her with blood in their eyes. "Damn bitch, get away from him," growled an angry Luna who stood up from her chair with an incredible desire to throw herself on the table and hit a Luz who just looked at her with serious eyes. Girls, I think this is getting out of hand," a somewhat passive Lini was going to say, but was interrupted by a Luz who, regardless of the situation, responded. "Go ahead, keep insulting me. Any insult that comes to mind has already been said to me many times," Luz responded while clenching her fists in annoyance. "Ha. if they tell you less, it must be for a reason, Lewin responded aggressively, while at her side was Lin, who, although she was upset, still wasn't upset enough with the brunette to know that this was getting out of hand. Since I was a child, those insults have followed me endlessly at school, at home, wherever I am, they always insult me, Luz began with a somewhat tearful look, however, without finishing there, the brunette continued speaking. My world has always been shit. My parents, who are the ones who should be taking care of me, insult me as if I were just some bore, Luz continued, tears of rage spilling from her eyes. And yet, I found a light in this shitty world, Luz finished, leaving a silence that was broken by Lin, who tried to calm things down. Hey, I think Lini's right, this is getting out of hand, Lin said, trying to calm the situation. Now it was okay, Lin was angry with Luz, however her anger was not really as great as she normally used to express it before. Now you're probably wondering what was the reason for this decrease in anger on Lin's part. Well, this question has a somewhat simple answer, and this reason resides in yesterday. That's right, her lack of more intense anger towards Lin was due to her loss yesterday. Because even though her game yesterday was annoying and frustrating, Lin still remembered how Luz would lunge at the referee when she was fouled with the sole purpose of demanding the reason why said foul wasn't called. So yeah, Lin had in a certain sense developed a bit of respect for the brunette. Lin better be quiet, Lori was going to say only for what she was about to say to get stuck in her throat when the voice of a Naruto appeared in the room, generating a deafening silence. What's going on here? Was the question from Naruto, who for the first time showed a frown to his sisters, who felt a weight on their shoulders that slowly took the air out of their lungs. Then Naruto, we tried to say a nervous Lori, only to be interrupted by a Naruto who said. There's no need to make excuses, I heard what was necessary, Naruto interrupted, causing the weight on her shoulders to increase once again at the blonde's words. After all, it wasn't unknown to them that Naruto had a rather great appreciation for the brunette. Come on, let's go, said Naruto as he took the hand of Luz, who simply let herself be carried away under the watchful eyes of her sisters, who only watched Naruto close the door behind him. Throughout their lives, none of the loud sisters had ever seen Naruto angry with them. Well, maybe once or twice Naruto had scolded them, however, those times they knew that Naruto wasn't really angry with them. However, this time it was totally different. This time they could all feel that agonizing sensation of knowing that they had done something really wrong. This is a real mess, finally came the monotonous voice of an always impassive Lucy that broke the ice in the place. But Naruto 5 minutes later. As if silence were the protagonist of this story, it was once again present inside the car of a Naruto, who simply drove down the road towards the house of a Luz, who simply sat on the passenger side while rubbing her thighs with some discomfort. A Naruto Luz called to our blonde protagonist, who simply gave her a sigh of exhaustion. I'm sorry for all this, Naruto apologized to the brunette, who could only deny the apologies. No need to apologize, I was also partly to blame, Luz replied to Naruto, who simply shook his head. I've tried to make you two get along, but it just seems impossible, Naruto commented with disappointment, since he really wanted the people he cared about most in the world to get along. Naruto, you know it's not impossible, Luz began as Naruto took the entrance to the neighborhood where he lived. I'm going to do my part to make this work, Luz added, causing Naruto to finally take another turn until he finally parked in front of Luz's house and calmly turned to look at her. I know you've done your best to get along with my sisters, Naruto said as he raised his hand in the direction of Luz's cheek, who simply let the blonde caress it. And I'm very grateful for that, he added, then brought his face closer to Luz's, who simply copied the blonde's action, and they both shared a tender kiss that only lasted a couple of seconds. Well, I'll keep trying if that makes you happy, Luz finally said as she got out of the car, but not before saying. By the way, don't be mad at them, they just love you too much, she finally said with a tone of emphasis on the word love that left Naruto thoughtful, who could only watch the brunette close the door and enter the house where her loving family was supposed to be. Chapter 10. The loud house was always characterized by being a noisy place, no matter if it was morning or afternoon, there was always some kind of noise that bothered the neighbors to such an extent that they simply stopped trying to solve the problem and instead simply moved out of the place. In fact, this happened so many times that there was a time when the police knocked on her door every day, thanks to the angry neighbors who were already fed up with so much noise. However, since the noise didn't really come from electronic devices, and instead it was always arguments or fights that were heard, well, in fact, there were quite a few times that you could hear Luna composing a song with the electric guitar that Naruto had given her. But the police didn't have to know that detail. The thing is that since the noises weren't being generated by horns or anything like that, well, the police couldn't do much about it, so they simply arrived and asked for more silence, something that obviously none of the louds obeyed. Well, everyone except Naruto and Lucy, because one was calm and patient by nature and the other was quiet and antisocial by nature. All these events caused the houses around the loud house to finally end up abandoned without anyone wanting to move into those houses, causing them to rot to the point that they look like haunted houses. But hey, since there were no more neighbors to bother them anymore, that meant there was no one who would complain about the noise that was currently taking place in the loud house, an argument that wasn't about who used the bathroom first, an argument that had nothing to do with who controlled the TV, nor an argument over finding some lost nail polish. No, this discussion, despite being one of the noisiest, had nothing to do with any of that. This discussion had to do with someone they loved very much and who had left no more than 2.5 hours ago and hadn't come back. That's right, this discussion had to do with our blonde protagonist Naruto. Loud. Oh no, oh no, oh no girls, what do we do? This time we really screw up, was what was said by an almost hyperventilated Lola who didn't care that her makeup was starting to run due to the nervous sweat that was oozing from her body, along with a couple of tears of anguish. Lewin. Wait, don't leave us. Was the scream of a panicked Luna, who saw how Lewin was lying on the floor while she seemed to be convulsing, if the foam coming out of her mouth was anything to go by. Wait, Lucy. Suicide is not the answer. This time it was the voice of Ilori, who was trying to pull a brunette away from a rope to which she was firmly attached. Don't you want a cup of tea? On the other hand, this was the question that an abnormally polite Lana asked a trembling Lisa, who simply accepted the cup that didn't even contain coffee and instead had coffee powder, so guiding the cup to his mouth, Lisa proceeded to praise the tea. This is an excellent cup of tea, what good service. Praised and shouted a practically crazy Lisa, who had her mouth full of coffee, all this while two pairs of eyes looked at the scene with poker looks. However, already fed up with all this mess, the older of the two just kept looking at the scene, finally shouted to try to calm the matter down. Hey girls, relax now, was Lini's request, which was completely ignored by her sisters, who were still in a state of panic. Come on, it's not the end of the world, Lini tried once more, only to be ignored by her sisters once again, causing a vein to pop out on her forehead. Damn it. Shut the bucking mouth already. Was the scream of Lini that finally made everyone in the place shut up and turn their gazes in the direction of the always friendly Lini, who was now looking at everyone angrily. Needless to say that everyone at this moment was surprised, after all they had never in their lives heard their sister Lini curse in any way. "Buck, are you calm down?" Lori asked, but not before saying another curse that once again left the sisters perplexed. However, before any of those present said or did anything, Lini continued talking. "Well, since we're calm, you guys have to find a way to resolve this mess," Lini finally ordered, this time causing everyone except for a silent Lin standing next to her to look at her indignantly. "And why only us? You were also to blame," was the moan of Lewin, who spat out the rest of the foam in her mouth to be able to speak. "Excuse me? It was also my fault?" Lini asked indignantly, causing everyone to nod, except for Lin, of course. "Ha. Wait, are you serious? Let me laugh louder, ha. Lini mocked with fake amusement, causing each of the sisters to have a vein pop out on their forehead. "Say what you want, but you too," Lola was going to say, only for Lini to abruptly interrupt her. "Silence. I warned you when Naruto introduced us to Luz, who was the one who suggested that we get along with her for Naruto's sake." Lini asked, causing everyone to remain silent, since it was true, when Luz had been introduced for the first time, after a couple of days Lini had suggested that they get along with the brunette, and who knew if in the end she would end up liking them. However, no one paid attention. Who were the ones who saw that all this shit was getting out of control? "That's right, Lin and I, and what did you do? You decided to keep fighting," Lini scolded her sisters again, who could only look the other way. "So you're looking for a way to solve this, or I'm going to get really pissed off now," Lini threatened with a sour look that sent shivers down her sisters' spines. Meanwhile with Naruto. "Come on Motherbicker, one more I," were the moans of a Naruto, who with his face furrowed and a vein almost about to explode marked on his neck, finally managed to lift a bar with 5 discs on each side of 45 pounds each. "Fuck, how you turn me on when you get like that." Naruto heard the voice of an Erika, who slowly approached a Naruto, who calmly stood up from the bench, showing that he was wearing nothing but orange pants and gloves on his hands, revealing a dream body that anyone would want to have. "Oh hello Erika, sorry for not letting you know I was coming." Naruto apologized even though he worked here, however today was his day off. Well, needless to say, it was weird seeing him here when he always preferred to spend time at home pleasing his sisters. "You don't have to apologize, better tell me, what's wrong?" Erika dismissed the apologies and instead simply asked for the reason for the blonde's certainly depressing mood. Of course she asked this, but not before putting her hands around Naruto's waist, who simply let the brunette caress his abdomen. Let's just say I had a family argument," was the calm response of Naruto, who felt Erika's caresses stop dead upon hearing this event. Wait a minute there, are you telling me that you, the most loving brother I've ever seen in my entire life, finally had his first fight with his sisters?" Erika asked with some grace in her voice upon seeing the certainly peculiar scene. Sigh, leave it alone Erika, I'm not in the mood for this, the day has just begun, and everything has been shit, Naruto said with some annoyance, no longer wanting anything else to happen that would screw up his day even more. However, his day didn't seem to want Naruto to have a good day, and that was shown when the television that was playing the ESPN channel started talking about something that caught Naruto's attention. But that we have Group C, a pretty average group if you ask me, but well, why don't we go with the last group that was selected, and they are going to get a big surprise when they see the members, the commentator began. Well, the names of some teams that Naruto recognized as NFL teams were grouped into 3 groups, while at the bottom appeared the name of the tournament in which he and his 3rd division team were supposed to participate. And after becoming champions of the 2022 Super Bowl, the Los Angeles Rams faced the Kansas City Chiefs, the previous champion in 2023, the commentator continued narrating, while 2 logos appeared on the screen with an animation that made them spark. But if that's not enough, the Patriots appear on the scene stronger than ever, with a streak of 9 undefeated victories. Again the commentator spoke, while a 3rd logo appeared on the screen in an imposing way. Don't tell me, was the whisper of a Naruto who, after inspecting the first 3 groups and not seeing the name of his team, Naruto finally knew for sure what was going to happen. And to finish, appearing in the eye of the storm, a team that not even God knows, coming out of nowhere in a small town called Royal Woods in Michigan, the Royal Boys appear, finally announced the commentator at the moment that a somewhat tacky logo appeared on the screen, causing Naruto to cover his face in embarrassment. Well, I don't know what to say. Finally, after 20 seconds, in which Naruto disconnected what the commentator said, Erika said, with an abnormally calm voice, something very different from the voice she usually used. Change of scene. Almost arriving at his house, which was only a couple of blocks away, Naruto advanced between the houses next to his faithful car that had never let him down. No matter where he took it, it never left him stranded anywhere. So letting the car slow down because there were only a couple of meters left to reach his house, Naruto finally turned the wheel. At the moment he noticed something quite strange scratch that Naruto almost stopped suddenly and went back, thinking he had come to the wrong house after all. The particular patio of the house that was always full of toys thrown everywhere was now as clean and normal as any other house around him. However, lowering the window to get a clearer view of the house, Naruto felt the cold enter the car. However, ignoring that for the moment, Naruto finally saw that this was indeed the right house, if the name of the Loud family printed on the billboard was anything to go by. But what? Naruto asked himself with curiosity and confusion as he let the car move forward until finally leaving it parked in its usual place. So getting out of the car, Naruto turned his gaze around, only to notice that he didn't hear the normal noise that always came from inside the house, and instead it was as silent as a normal house. Walking along the wax that led to the main door, Naruto finally felt that someone, or rather a lot of eyes, were looking at him, so turning his gaze in that direction, Naruto could only see an empty window in which a curtain was swaying from side to side lazily, so ignoring that for the moment, Naruto finally stood in front of the door to then open it and once again be surprised when, instead of finding a totally messy house, Naruto found the cleanest house he had ever seen in his life. Okay, I definitely got the house mixed up, Naruto said in a whisper. As quickly as he finished saying it, Naruto had to look to his left when a voice spoke to him with a rather exaggerated formality. "Welcome home, my lord," were the 2 voices in unison that spoke to one side of Naruto, almost making him jump in surprise. So turning his gaze in said voices, Naruto found a firmly standing Lola and Lana, who were wearing smoking suits. Naruto would not ask where they got those suits from. "Lord?" was the only question Naruto could formulate. Well, Game of Thrones came to mind. However, before he even said or did anything, Naruto was dragged to the backyard where there was a round table for 2 that was adorned with some white sheets and a couple of flowers and candles. So seeing himself almost forced to sit at the table, Naruto simply watched as Lana approached with a bottle wrapped with napkins. "Do you want some wine, my dear?" Lana asked, tilting the bottle slightly in the direction of a glass that Lola quickly placed on the table. "Yeah, of course," Naruto replied as he watched Lana nod and then poured the liquid, which quickly foamed up, implying that it wasn't wine, but rather soda, something relieving since if it really was wine, Naruto was going to ask them where they got it from. "I'll leave the menu so you can take your time ordering," Lola offered as she left a menu that, although it was noticeable that it was hidden on the fly, was still quite well done. "And while you think about it, delight yourself with our special magic show," Lana added as she left the place, only for the sound of a violin to appear next to a piano and what Naruto later recognized as the voice of someone who knew about opera. So moving his head from side to side, Naruto could finally see Luna, Lisa and Lucy to one side a little away from the table, while they played their respective instruments, or well, that was in case of Luna and Lisa, that as curious as he was, he wouldn't ask where they had gotten a violin and a piano, that although it wasn't that big, it was still big enough to be the perfect size for Lisa. On the other hand, there was the always quiet Lucy who, once her time to sing came, finally let her voice project in such a way that Naruto would almost swear it sounded like those choirs from Dark Souls. It was quite incredible. But not ending Naruto's attention was finally called by a Lewin who entered the stage with an equally elegant suit as Lunam Lisa and Lucy, so paying attention to what was going to be her sister Naruto, was finally surprised when out of nowhere, and in a blaze of fire, the always joker Lewin made Rose appear that not a second later caught fire, and from this appeared a deck of cards that without wasting a single inch of time approached Naruto and then gave him to choose a card. Looking once more in the direction of the Naruto soundtrack, he noticed how Luna and Lisa began to play with more intensity while moving in more exaggerated and dramatic ways, so taking a Naruto card he could hear how Lucy's voice became present again in a way, almost as if he were in the fight against the final boss of a video game. Leaving Naruto, Lewin calmly returned to her original position, only to make the cards that Naruto noticed were original disappear in another flame of fire, leaving only one in her hand that was revealed to be the Ace of Hearts, so remembering that was her card, Naruto quickly raised his card only to see that it had been changed for a joker. Okay, Naruto had to admit that this trick was incredible. How did he do it? Naruto didn't know, but anyway, leaving it behind, Naruto finally ended up enjoying the show that lasted about 15 minutes, but they were 15 intense minutes. Once everything was over and the soundtrack had ended in a spectacular unison closing with an incredible trick from Lewin, Naruto finally finished by ordering a steak with rice and a shrimp cocktail. 18 minutes later and a calm melody from his three sisters on the side, his food was finally brought by a Lori who was wearing a chef's outfit, and once again Naruto had to praise how good it looked, so cutting a piece of meat Naruto finally ate it, only to open his eyes in surprise when the incredibly tasty flavor surrounded his palate. Wow, this is delicious, Naruto praised Lori, who had been waiting for Naruto's answer, so once the blonde said that praise, Lori was finally able to let out a sigh that she didn't know she was holding back, so once they reached this point, Lori and the other girls who peeked out from inside the house finally decided to apologize. Naruto, don't you forgive us? Lori asked, leaving an awkward silence until he finally let out a laugh of amusement when he understood what they were talking about. Seriously, was that all of this? Naruto asked, to which everyone simply turned their heads away in embarrassment, so standing up from his seat, Naruto finally said. Girls, I can never be angry with you are everything to me, Naruto finally said as he opened his arms for a hug, to which each of them gladly threw themselves. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.